Jiang Chun was jolted roughly out of bed by an ear-splitting deafening bang. The back of his skull slammed hard against the cold, rough floor tiles. A loud buzzing rang through his head, as if a sledgehammer had struck the inside of his cranium, and bursts of blurry stars exploded across his vision in an instant. He gritted his teeth and swore under his breath, planting his palms flat on the ground to push himself upright, only to feel the entire shabby dormitory building shake violently beneath him. The walls creaked with a grating, teeth-rattling sound as they split open, and cheap white plaster crumbled down from the ceiling, dusting his head and face completely. Earthquake. Su Qingya on the opposite bunk had already sat bolt upright. Faint light seeped through the window, revealing the pair of thin metal-rimmed glasses perched on his nose. His eyes were as cold and clear as ever, without a trace of the grogginess of someone just woken up. Tai Nan, who slept on the upper bunk, simply leapt straight down the metal ladder. His bulky frame stood at 185 centimeters and weighed well over 100 kilos. And the impact of his landing sent the loose composite floorboards shuddering violently with a dull boom. In the corner, Xiao Luo curled up under his quilt like a shrimp, only half his fluffy head peeking out as he mumbled drowsily, "What time is it? Can't a person get any sleep around here? Don't just stand there frozen. Put your shoes on and get downstairs." Ignoring the dull throbbing at the back of his head, Jiang Chun snatched his phone from beside his pillow and glanced at the screen. 3:17 a.m. The harsh white glow cut through the darkness, illuminating his taut face and making him squint instinctively. But he immediately noticed something wrong with the sky outside the window. It was far too bright, and the hue was deeply unnatural. He strode over to the window and ripped the curtains open, freezing dead in his tracks the second he saw the view. The moon was blood red. This was nothing like the rare super blood moon reported in science documentaries. The entire vast sky had been dyed a thick, murky crimson. The shade was deep and suffocating, as if some divine being had sliced open a wrist high above the firmament and spilled bucket after bucket of thick blood across the dark heavens. Even the camphor trees outside the dorm and the weathered walls of the building opposite were wrapped in this eerie scarlet glow. Moments later, a blinding white streak tore across the blood-red sky without warning, dragging a long glowing tail as it drew nearer and blazed ever brighter. Shit! What the hell is that? Tynan had crowded beside him at some point, his massive frame trembling with raw terror, accidentally shoving Jiang Chun hard enough to tilt his shoulder sideways. The white streak came screaming through the air, hurtling straight down without deviation, right toward their Block 6 dormitory building. Jiang Chen's mind went completely blank in that split second. His body reacted faster than his rational thought. He spun sharply and pounced like a cheetah toward Xiao Luo, grabbing the edge of the quilt in both hands and yanking the boy, thick blanket and all, off the bed. He pressed him flat against the dust-covered floorboards. At the same time, he roared hoarsely at Su Qingya and Tai Nan, "Get down. Cover your heads." Then the whole world blew apart. The searing white light ripped straight through the concrete roof slab, piercing the 6th, 5th, and 4th floors in a single unbroken line of destructive force before crashing violently through the ceiling of their 3rd-floor dorm room. There was no deafening explosion as he'd expected, only an overwhelming hum that instantly robbed them of their hearing. An indescribable wave of scorching hot air slammed forward like a solid wall, sending everyone in the dorm flying backward at once. Jiang Chun felt a violent surge of heat in his chest as his back crashed brutally into a solid brick wall. It felt as though all his internal organs had shifted out of place, and a sharp metallic tang flooded the back of his throat immediately. He had no idea how long he lay unconscious in the pitch-black silence. When he finally opened his eyes again, the dormitory was unrecognizable, reduced to wreckage as if shelled by artillery fire. A massive, charred hole gaped in the center of the ceiling, twisted steel rebar exposed. Through that gap, he could see the suffocating blood-red sky stretching endlessly overhead. Only 2 of the 4 bunk bed desks still stood lopsided and intact. The wooden desks had been torn to splinters by the shockwave. Fragmented planks, scattered books, and shards of window glass littered every inch of the floor. A strange odor hung thick in the air, the acrid stench of synthetic fibers scorched at extreme heat, mixed with an unsettling, cloying sickly sweet tang that burned their nostrils. Jiang Chen tested moving his stiff limbs. Thankfully, they responded. Every inch of his skin burned sharply, but there was none of the agonizing, piercing pain that came with broken bones. Gritting his teeth, he pushed himself up through the scattered glass shards and brushed dust off his clothes. His first instinct was to check for the others. Old Su, Tainan, Xiao Luo, are any of you alive? His voice scraped rough and dry like sandpaper. I'm here. Su Qingya's voice drifted out from behind a pile of splintered wardrobe planks. It sounded breathless and muffled, yet still remarkably steady. Yeah, I'm okay. Tai Nan's deep rumble echoed from the wreckage near the dorm doorway on the other side of the room. Jingu, something heavy's pinned me down. I can't move. Xiao Luo's voice came from the corner, trembling thick with the threat of tears. Relief loosened the iron grip coiled around Jiang Qin's nerves the moment he heard all three roommates alive. A cold sweat broke out across his back, chilling him as a faint draft swept through the wreckage. Damn it. He truly thought they were all going to die there a moment before. He drew a deep breath and stumbled across the debris toward Xiao Luo. He strained to lift the heavy wardrobe panel pinning the boy and tossed it aside. The dorm was shrouded in deep shadow, and the faint crimson glow filtering through the ceiling hole offered barely enough light to make out shapes. But as he hauled Xiao Luo to his feet, Jiang Qin noticed something odd beneath his palms. Xiao Luo had always been thin, yet his arms felt unnaturally soft and yielding. His skin shockingly smooth to the touch. Are you hurt? Any broken bones? No, just my legs went numb from being trapped, that's all. There was something off about Xiao Luo's tone. His usual clear, youthful voice had shifted entirely, carrying an odd soft, delicate lilt it had never held before. Jiang Qin's mind was racing with panic, leaving no room to linger on the strange detail. Once he confirmed the boy could stand steadily, he turned to hunt for Su Qingya amid the rubble. Power was completely cut, plunging the room into total darkness. None of their phones had survived the blast intact, scattered God knew where in the chaos. He navigated blindly by memory. Old Su, where are you? Did you get hurt? Stay back. I can get up on my own. Su Qingya's tone retained its usual cool, distant edge, but his voice was no longer the crisp, low male baritone Jiang Qin knew. A soft, gentle warmth lingered beneath every word now. Jiang Qin paused mid-step, his brows drawing tight. Everything about this night felt wrong, layered with an uncanny sense of dissonance. But survival hung in the balance, and he had no time to unpack the minor oddities swirling around him. Just then, a shrill, blood-curdling scream ripped through the air outside the dorm. The cry ignited chaos like a lit fuse. It was not one voice screaming, but hundreds, wailing in unbridled terror, surging down from the floors above, echoing up from below, and pouring from every end of the hallway. With the screams came frantic slamming on doors, chaotic running footsteps, and a horrid gnawing sound, hard teeth tearing through flesh and crunching bone. What the hell is that noise? Tynan had stumbled over to the warped dorm door, one hand resting on the broken doorknob. Jiang Qin's heart seized tight in his chest. A primal warning blared in the back of his mind, every hair standing straight on his skin as an icy chill shot straight to the crown of his head. Don't touch that door. Let go. He barked sharply. The words barely left his mouth before a thunderous blow crashed against the wood from outside. A deafening boom caved the already flimsy door inward, plaster dust showering off the crumbling doorframe. A second impact hit, then a third, fast, unrelenting strikes, delivered without a hint of pain or hesitation. Alongside the pounding, a thick, gurgling rumble seeped through the cracks beneath the door. It was no human sound, a wet, choking growl like some beast salivating before a meal. The screams in the hallway grew denser, more agonizing, as if the corridor had turned into a living hell. Some people sobbed in total collapse, others hammered desperately on neighboring dorm doors begging for help. And one voice shrieked, "It bit me. Somebody help," only to cut off mid-cry, snuffed out like a candle after a sickening wet tearing sound. Jiang Qin's breathing grew ragged, his mind racing through countless absurd possibilities before landing on one ridiculous, unthinkable word. Zombies. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. This was the real world governed by science, not some doomsday sci-fi movie. Yet the door continued to shudder under unceasing, mechanical blows from outside, driven by a single-minded hunger for living flesh that no sane human could ever possess. Stop staring and hold this door shut. Jiang Qin sprinted across the wreckage in a single bound, slamming his right shoulder hard against the warped wooden panel and bracing his feet against a raised tile on the floor. Tynan snapped out of his stunned daze and rushed forward, pressing his broad back against the door beside him. Together, their combined weight of nearly 200 kilos, muscles strained to their absolute limit, managed to wedge the splintering door firmly shut. But the force slamming against them only intensified. There was more than one creature out there. Jiang Qin pressed his ear flat to the wood and made out the truth clearly. At least 3 or 4 heavy figures threw themselves relentlessly at their thin dorm door. their nails scraping harshly against the metal door frame with a shrill, piercing screech. Grab whatever you can to block the door. Hurry, haul every heavy thing over here. His neck veins bulged as he ground the words out between clenched teeth. Su Qingya and Xiao Luo did not waste a single second speaking, immediately scrambling through the rubble to hunt for weight. Splintered desk planks, heavy metal bunk railings, warped wardrobe doors, every movable heavy object they could find was dragged over with all their strength, stacked layer upon layer behind the door as a barricade. No one spoke in the darkness. The only sounds filling the dorm were the scraping drag of heavy debris and the ragged, labored gasps of 4 people pushed to the edge of terror and exertion. The horrid pounding outside persisted for what felt like an endless 10 minutes. Eventually, the creatures seemed drawn away by stronger sense of blood or louder commotion downstairs. A series of thick, guttural snarls echoed as their shuffling, sticky footsteps dragged slowly off into the distance. A suffocating silence crashed over the dorm. The only noises left were their ragged bellows like breathing and the thunderous hammer of each person's heartbeat in their chests. What the hell is going on out there? Tynan slid down the wall to the floor in complete exhaustion, his massive frame hunching inward as his voice shook uncontrollably. No one had an answer for him. Jiang Chun felt drained to his bones as well, sliding slowly down the barricaded door until he sat flat on the ground. His shirt clung to his torso, soaked all the way through with cold sweat. He patted blindly at the rubble beside him and caught lucky hold of a cracked phone. Its screen spiderwebbed with fractures, belonging to one of the others. He pressed the power button. The screen flared to life, its harsh pale white light slicing abruptly through the shadow and landing squarely on Su Qingya, who leaned against the wall catching her breath across the room. Jiang Chen's mind went utterly blank for 3 full seconds. This was not Su Qingya, or more accurately, this person bore no resemblance to the male roommate he'd shared a dorm with for 3 years. Beneath the faint glow of the cracked screen was an exquisitely delicate woman's face. Tousled raven black hair spilled loosely over slender shoulders. Skin pale enough to look almost translucent, flawless beneath the harsh light. Her features were refined enough to look as though they'd been carefully painted by a master artist. Those eyes, the same pair of sharp, detached, hyper-rational eyes he recognized as Su Qingya's, visible behind her half-shattered metal-rimmed glasses. Yet they belonged undeniably to a woman's face. Su Qingya herself caught sight of Jiang Chen's stunned, horrified stare. Following the glow of the phone screen, she glanced down at the hand braced against the wall beside her. It was a slender, pale, perfectly proportioned woman's hand, nothing like the large, calloused hands of the 180-centimeter engineering student who spent every waking hour buried in lab work and coding. The air in the dorm thickened to solidity, sinking into a deathly hush. Everyone held their breath without a sound. Then Tai Nan, crouched in the corner, slowly lifted his head and broke the eerie silence. His deep, gruff northeastern drawl was gone entirely, replaced by an unfamiliar woman's mid-range voice, rough with confusion. Jiang Chun, old Su, my chest feels like there's something heavy growing out of me. The pale white glow from the cracked phone trembled uncontrollably in Jiang Chen's dust-streaked palm. It was not fear driving the shake in his hands. As captain of the school Sonda Club, he'd faced countless street thugs and mass brawls without flinching. He'd once fought 4 larger sports students single-handedly in his first year without a moment's hesitation. But the scene unfolding before him shattered every basic law of human biology, tearing apart every rational truth he believed in for 20 years. Su Qingya remained slumped against the wreckage-strewn wall, yet every line of her body had warped into something unrecognizable. The loose gray oversized t-shirt that had fit her former frame perfectly hung slack and baggy over narrow shoulders now. With every shallow breath she took, the neckline slipped crookedly aside, exposing a slender, pale collarbone that glowed faintly beneath the dim red light filtering through the ceiling hole. Her facial structure retained the familiar sharp, reserved outline he knew, yet every hard masculine edge had softened away by some unknown force. Her prominent cheekbones had narrowed, her jawline tapered smooth and delicate, and her perpetually thin-pressed lips had filled out into full, faintly pink curves. Her half-broken thin metal-rimmed glasses sat askew atop a small, refined nose. Far from softening the jarring sight, they lent her an uncanny air of quiet restraint. Old Su, Jiang Chun heard his own voice scrape out dry and raspy, his Adam's apple bobbing hard once. Your Su Qingya did not meet his gaze. She stared fixedly down at her hands, slowly turning them palm up, then stiffly flipping them back over again. These hands could never belong to an engineering student, slender, pale fingers with rounded pink-tinted nails, skin smooth and unmarred. The faint calluses that had lined his fingertips and palm roots from years of late-night coding had vanished without a trace, replaced by skin as silky and fine as polished white jade. "Hand me the phone." Su Qingyao spoke at last. The sound of her voice sent another jolt of prickling dread racing down Jiang Chen's spine. His old roommate's deep, cool male baritone was gone entirely, replaced by a fully feminine tone. Her speech still carried Su Qingyao's signature unemotional detachment. Yet each syllable rolled out with an innate soft, gentle lilt unique to women. A wildly inappropriate thought flickered through Jiang Chen's mind, and he bit his tongue hard enough to draw a faint taste of iron, forcing the absurd notion back down into the depths of his mind. He stretched his arms stiffly forward and passed over the jagged, cracked phone. The second their fingertips touched, Jiang Chen registered that her skin was ice-cold, lacking any trace of living warmth. She held the phone flat before her without expression and flipped to the front camera. The harsh pale screen light illuminated every delicate feature of her face without mercy. In that instant, Jiang Chen watched Su Qingya's usual sharp, alert eyes empty completely of all focus. She froze rigidly holding the phone, her chest stilling mid-breath, not blinking once. Like a machine abruptly cut off from its power supply, locked motionless amid the wreckage thick with burnt chemical stench. "Shit." Amid the deathly silence, Tai Nan's voice suddenly echoed from behind the wreckage of the wardrobe in the corner. A husky voice, surprisingly mature and feminine, uttered that single curse with perfect articulation. The jarring disconnect between what he expected and what he heard sent every hair on Jiang Chen's body standing rigid like steel needles once more. Next came a frantic, heavy rummaging sound. From beneath a pile of rubble, Tai Nan fished out the brick-sized power bank flashlight he'd always carried around. A sharp click cut through the air, and an intensely bright, white beam flared to life. The light swirled twice through clouds of dust hanging suspended in the air before locking straight onto Tai Nan herself. Bathed in that harsh glow, Jiang Chen saw the full scene unguarded. He gasped a mouthful of air thick with the stench of blood, nearly choking on his own saliva. Tai Nan's original frame, 185 centimeters tall, over 100 kilos of solid muscle, was completely gone. In his place stood a woman of striking, powerful build. Jiang Chen swallowed hard, forcing himself not to look away. She was no delicate, frail thing. Her bone structure remained broad, her limbs visibly toned and firm. Smooth, defined muscle lines hinting at explosive strength lined her thighs and arms. Yet her figure held distinctly feminine curves unlike anything he'd seen in any magazine. Tai Nan still wore the oversized 3XL Lakers basketball tank top. The jersey that had clung tight to the burly man now hung loose and baggy on her frame, though the neckline stretched wide across her shoulders. The hem fell only to the top of her thighs. As she huddled in a squat, a long stretch of warm tawny, firm legs was exposed, glowing with a healthy sheen under the cold white flashlight. Tai Nan seemed utterly oblivious to how strange she looked now. She stared blankly down at her own torso, then lifted her head to meet Jiang Chen's gaze. Her wild, striking face was etched with utter confusion, and her thick eyelashes fluttered violently. "Jiang Chen." Tai Nan's lips trembled as she spoke. "Am I dreaming? Did that falling ceiling crack my brain and make me hallucinate?" "Pinch yourself to check." Jiang Chen's heart felt ready to hammer out of his throat. Without hesitation, Tai Nan raised a hand with sharp fingernails and pinched the pale skin of her forearm hard, leaving a deep crimson crescent mark. "Ah, that hurts." A soft whimper escaped her. The faint cry carried an innate gentle lilt, a stark contrast to the rough, gruff tone Tai Nan had always used when swearing, sending an odd tingle down Jiang Chen's spine. "It's no dream." Jiang Chen rubbed his stiff cheeks, his throat parched as if ready to ignite. "I also." A faint voice drifted over from the opposite corner. Xiao Luo peeked half his head out through a gap in a collapsed metal bunk bed, trembling like a startled quail. Tai Nan's flashlight beam swept over him instantly. A tiny, delicate girl huddled there looking miserable. Her hair had turned pure snow white, matted and messy across her thin shoulders. On her small, delicate face, a pair of ruby-red irises glowed faintly in the dark, making her look exactly like a skittish Persian cat. Jiang Chen's mind was in complete disarray, as if a herd of wild horses were trampling back and forth inside his skull. 3 men who'd shared the same dorm for 3 years had all transformed. Within mere minutes of that strange white light crashing down, every last one of them had turned into breathtaking women. What about him? Trapped in this bizarre apocalypse where zombies roamed outside and his closest friends swapped genders. Had he somehow landed the lead role in some cheap, absurd horror story? Calm down, all of you. Jiang Chun braced his hands flat against the cold ground littered with shattered glass shards. The stinging pain in his palms grounded him enough to regain a sliver of composure. Let's sort out what's happening first. Those creatures roaming the hall outside are almost certainly zombies, just like in Resident Evil. Whatever crashed through the ceiling amid that red light must have done something to alter reality. He paused, sweeping his gaze over the three unfamiliar, beautiful faces before him, jaw tight. It changed your bodies, but nothing happened to me. He held up both palms for them to see. Still the same broad, strong hands, rough-skinned, thick calluses lining the base of his thumbs from years of punching sandbags. An old pale scar marked his middle knuckle. He ran his palms roughly over his jaw and cheeks, desperate to confirm his own form. His features remained sharp and angular, stubble pricking his fingertips where he hadn't shaved the night before. His Adam's apple prominent in his neck. Why am I the only one unaffected? He furrowed his brows, muttering to himself. No one in the wreckage could answer him. Su Qingya remained frozen like a beautiful statue, staring numbly at her reflection on her cracked phone screen. Her eyes hollow and lifeless in a way that terrified him. Tynan slumped onto the ground, burying her head. The movement pulled her jersey tight across her frame, emphasizing the shift in her physique. And Jiang Chen quickly snapped his gaze away as heat rushed to his face. The youngest, Xiao Luo, was the first to snap out. She scrambled out of the narrow corner gap on hands and knees, padding over to Jiang Chun like a timid kitten, tilting her head up to stare at him with wide eyes. Xiao Luo's height had shrunk drastically, nearly 30 centimeters shorter than Jiang Chen's 182 centimeters. His already slight frame had grown even smaller and delicate. Her crimson eyes flickered with unease. Brother Chun, Xiao Luo's voice was soft and sweet like melted cotton candy, tinged with quiet distress. Something feels wrong with my clothes down there. What do you mean, wrong? Jiang Chen's eyes twitched violently. It's just, everything's different. Something fundamental is gone. Xiao Luo blinked innocently, her red eyes wide. Jiang Chen squeezed his eyes shut tightly, drawing in a deep breath thick with burnt smoke. I get it, don't elaborate. I don't want the details. But my pants keep slipping down. Xiao Luo glanced down, tugging weakly at her black track trousers with a dejected look. Her hip bones had narrowed, so the waistband no longer fit, sliding all the way down to her upper thighs and exposing a stretch of pale, slender waist and a slim, flat stomach. Pull your trousers up and tie the drawstring tight. Jiang Chen twisted his head sharply away, blue veins throbbing on his forehead. Just then, Tynan surged to her feet in a gust of wind. Though she stood over 10 centimeters shorter than before, her bearing still matched the bold northeast brute he'd known. Hands planted firmly on her new narrow hips, her elegant chin tilted high, long legs spread wide. Jiang Chun, explain this to me clearly. Tynan glared hard at him. Her face balanced striking wild beauty and soft feminine features, twisted with the unbridled rage that had always defined Tai Nan's personality. Was that strange light the culprit? That weird object that crashed through the ceiling? I believe so. Jiang Chun met her gaze evenly. Then why the hell didn't it change you? How should I know? Jiang Chen snapped back, his temper flaring too. Did you hide some kind of protective charm on you without telling us? Tai Nan, have you lost your mind? Jiang Chen shot to his feet, lowering his voice to a sharp growl. What trick could I possibly pull to turn 3 grown men into women in an instant? I'd have long left this hellhole. Tynan stared furiously at him for a full 5 seconds, her chest rising and falling rapidly with heavy breaths. Finally, she clicked her tongue, glowering and turning her face away in irritation. That small huff escaped full, soft feminine lips, paired with her unruly, fierce expression, creating an unnerving, overwhelming allure. Jiang Chun gritted his teeth, forcing every distracting, inappropriate thought from his mind. As the two stood locked in tension, Su Qingya finally set down her cracked smartphone. She lifted her head slowly, looking toward Jiang Chun through the faint ambient light. Her eyes behind shattered lens frames remained cold as ever, yet Jiang Chun caught a flicker of an emotion he'd never once seen cross Su Qingya's face in 3 years of living together: fear. Su Qingya was scared. The realization crashed over him like a bucket of ice water, filling him with more dread than the sound of zombies slamming against the door downstairs. Su Qingya had never shown an ounce of weakness since their first day of university. She'd scored full marks on advanced math finals without a hint of pride on her face. When she'd fought street thugs outside campus and come home bloodied, she'd wrapped her wounds and headed straight back to the internet cafe to settle scores without a single tremor. Even when her father suffered a sudden cerebral hemorrhage and was hospitalized, she'd calmly sorted out all medical fees and care arrangements without a single outburst, only slipping out to the dorm balcony alone afterward. Now, the ever-logical, unshakable Su Qingya was terrified. Jiang Chun, Su Qingya spoke slowly. Her voice sounded steady, yet Jiang Chun could pick up the faint, barely perceptible tremor beneath the calm surface. Every syllable strained by sheer force of will. Set aside the zombies outside for a moment. Tell me what your intuition says. Can this complete transformation of our bodies ever be reversed? Jiang Chun parted his lips, unable to answer. His mouth went dry, his brain blank. How could he possibly know if something this bizarre, too outlandish for even science fiction novels, could ever be undone? I don't know. But bang, bang. Jiang Chun never finished his sentence. Heavy thuds echoed from the floor directly below their room. Seconds later, an ear-splitting, broken scream pierced the night sky through the windows. The cry brimmed with unadulterated despair and agony, dragging on for 7 or 8 full seconds, intertwined with sickening sounds of tearing flesh and crunching bone before cutting off abruptly, as if severed by a blade. Silence crashed over the 4 people in the dorm all at once, every breath caught in their throats. Every muscle in Jiang Chen's body coiled tight, like a drawn bowstring. He crouched low, stepping lightly toward the broken wooden door blocked by heavy debris, pressing his ear flat against the cold panel to listen. Dragging, sticky footsteps shuffled down the hallway. Splatter, splatter. The steps moved slowly and heavily. Every so often, the creature lost its balance, its massive frame slamming into the faded hallway wall with a dull, teeth-grinding thud, followed by a low, guttural snarl. The danger hadn't faded. The gates of hell had only just swung open. Jiang Chun turned back, his gaze heavy as he looked at the 3 people before him. 3 entirely unfamiliar faces. Yet their eyes held the familiarity of his oldest friends, all half shrouded in the faint glow of the power bank flashlight and the eerie crimson light seeping in from outside, staring back at him tight with anxiety. Push the thought of our changed bodies to the back of your minds for now. Jiang Chun clenched his scratched fists tight, lowering his voice, his gaze sharp and resolute as a wolf's. Whether we're men or women, nothing matters right now. Our only priority is to survive through tonight, no matter what it takes. Dawn broke. The ominous crimson haze hanging over the outside world hadn't faded completely. The newly risen sun hung behind a thick, blood-red veil, casting murky scarlet light into every corner. The glow flooded the half-destroyed dormitory, coating shards of glass, splintered wood planks, and dried dark stains. The burnt smoky tang in the air had thinned, but a cloying metallic scent of blood seeped steadily through the cracks beneath the door. Jiang Chun leaned against the warped doorframe, his thigh muscles twitching involuntarily. None of them had slept a wink all night. The zombies, or whatever those abominations were, had charged the door twice in the dead of night. Each time, Jiang Chun and Tyne embraced their shoulders, holding the barrier shut without daring to breathe, taking turns standing guard through the hours. By morning, Jiang Chun felt as though the bones in both shoulders were splitting apart. Su Qingya and Xiao Luo had huddled in the only intact lower bunk bed in the corner, also wide awake through the endless night. With sunrise, they could switch the flashlight off. The dim scarlet glow filtering inside laid every wrecked detail bare, including his 3 roommates, permanently altered into women. Jiang Chun rolled his sore neck, his eyes landing first on Su Qingya. For the first time, he was forced to take in her full form clearly. She stood roughly 175 centimeters tall, long black matted hair, cascading all the way to her waist. She still wore the loose gray cotton t-shirt she'd slept in the night before. The shirt had fit perfectly on Su Qingya's original 180-centimeter frame, but now it slipped off one shoulder, the hem barely covering the tops of her thighs. Her legs stretched long and straight, pale enough to dazzle the eye, dangling loosely over the edge of the bed like polished porcelain. As for her face, her beauty was staggering, far beyond the casual attractiveness that made strangers whistle on the street. One glance was enough to make anyone's mind go blank. Every feature aligned to create an aura of icy, unapproachable cold, like a sheet of solid ice in the dead of winter. Su Qingya sat on the bed edge, staring motionlessly down at her own legs. Jiang Chun swallowed hard and quickly diverted his eyes, shifting his attention to Tainan nearby. Tainan sat cross-legged on the dust-covered floor, striking the exact posture she'd always used for playing cards. legs spread wide in a casual, unself-conscious sprawl, elbows propped loosely on her knees, head drooping with a weary, irritable expression. The trouble was the 3XL Lakers basketball tank top she still wore. The jersey that had clung snugly to the heavy-set man before hung short and loose on her new frame. With her legs splayed open cross-legged, the fabric bunched high around her waist. Tainan. Jiang Chen twisted his neck hard to look away, nearly straining it. Can you sit with your legs closed? Huh? What's wrong? Tainan lifted her head, utterly confused. That look paired with her striking features was devastating. Warm, tawny skin, sharp yet soft facial features, eyes tilted upward at the corners. A faint permanent edge of roguish amusement marked her mouth. It was the exact blank confusion Tainan always wore, yet rendered impossibly striking on this new feminine face. Your legs. Jiang Chen stared fixed at a cracked tile, forcing the words out. When you sit like that, your clothes don't cover you properly. Tainan glanced down at her legs, then back at Jiang Chen, freezing for 3 full seconds before slapping her palm against her forehead. Damn, I forgot. She scrambled to snap her legs shut, slamming her kneecaps together hard with a sharp crack. Tainan winced, reaching down to rub her aching knees. Jiang Chen pressed one palm to his forehead, massaging his throbbing temples hard with his fingertips. What am I even doing? He thought frantically to himself. Zombies roam every corridor outside. And here I am lecturing my former bunkmate about how to sit properly. All because he's turned into a woman and his wide posture leaves him exposed. What a messed up, twisted world. The jarring disconnect between reality and expectation threatened to unravel what little sanity Jiang Chen held onto. Brother Chen. A soft, gentle call pulled him from his racing thoughts. Xiao Luo had wandered over. The tiny girl crouched beside Jiang Chen, her snow-white hair sticking up in messy tufts all over her head. Her ruby-red eyes stared at him wide, their irises glowing with an eerie, translucent quality. I'm hungry, Xiao Luo whimpered, sniffling softly. I'm starving too. Tainan stood abruptly, stretching her arms overhead in a deep, exhaustive yawn. The oversized basketball jersey stretched taut across her torso. The movement caused the fabric to ride up high, exposing her midriff. Jiang Chen flinched and quickly diverted his gaze, fixing his eyes rigidly on a crack running down the wall. He'd lost count of how many times he'd forced himself to look away since dawn, at least 10 times. It wasn't that he wanted to stare on purpose. The 3 people before him, his roommates who'd been ordinary young men just the night prior, had no idea how drastically their appearances had shifted. Their minds, thought patterns, and mannerisms remained entirely masculine. But their bodies had transformed completely beyond recognition. We'll sort out food later. Jiang Chen stood, taking 2 deep breaths to steady his tone as if nothing was amiss. First, we need to confirm 3 things. 1. What exactly are those creatures outside? 2. Your physical conditions. 3. All supplies we have left. We need to tally everything to figure out how to survive. A heavy silence fell over the dorm room. Su Qingya was the first to break it, her voice flat and devoid of any emotion. Jiang Chen knew her well. This was how she coped with extreme distress, bury all panic and confusion deep down, leaving only cold, unfeeling logic on the surface. Muscle mass has dropped sharply, body fat composition altered drastically, bone structure shrunk. She pushed up her half-shattered glasses, her fingers steady. Heart rate is normal, body temperature slightly low. She paused, her eyelashes fluttering rapidly for a split second. Full physiological restructuring has taken place. The odds of this change being reversible exceed 90%. The room sank into dead silence after those words. Even Xiao Luo forgot her hunger. Damn it, Tainan exploded, slamming a fist hard against the load-bearing wall beside her. Her stance, the stable core behind the blow, carried the unbridled rage of a sports academy athlete. Yet the wall only let out a dull thud. Flakes of cheap white plaster crumbled off, leaving a faint indent of her knuckles. If it had been the old Tainan, that punch would have shattered the worn plaster coating entirely. My strength's gone too. Tainan stared down at her reddened fist, her face clouded with despair. A heavy weight settled in Jiang Chen's chest. These 3 were his closest friends. Just last night, they'd arm wrestled in this dorm, all sturdy, powerful young men. Su Qingya, the 1.8-meter-tall engineering prodigy. Tainan, the 1.85-meter sports specialist. Xiao Luo, a shut-in but still a guy. Now he was the only man left in room 302 of dormitory 6. The thought crushed him under an overwhelming burden, yet he clamped his jaw, refusing to let his anxiety show. Getting angry won't help. Let's count our supplies. Jiang Chen turned and rummaged through the room. The thermos shattered last night. Under my cabinet, there's half a carton of instant noodles and 2 unopened bottles of mineral water. I've got several packs of beef jerky in my cabinet. Tai Nan ran a frustrated hand through her hair. Jiang Chen nodded and turned to Su Qingya. Any cell service? Su Qingya shook her head. I tried everything. All signals are dead. No cellular network. No internet. The base stations must have collapsed. We still have electricity. Jiang Chen glanced up at the flickering overhead fluorescent tube. The voltage was unstable, but it still cast a faint glow. The school's backup generator is still running, but there's no telling how long it can sustain power for large equipment. Jiang Chen. Su Qingya's pale face was bathed in crimson light as she looked at him. We have to go outside. I know. Jiang Chen grabbed the 2 water bottles. We'll starve trapped here with no food or water. That's not what I mean. Su Qingya's gaze drifted slowly down to her own frame. Her loose gray t-shirt hung baggy on her figure, revealing swathes of pale skin if she bent forward even slightly. We need proper clothing. Her tone stayed calm, yet Jiang Chen caught a faint edge of strain beneath it. That was when Jiang Chen realized their most critical crisis. None of their old clothes fit anymore. Tynan could barely wear the oversized basketball jersey as a makeshift short cover, provided she kept still. Su Qingya's trousers had fallen off overnight, leaving her bare-legged from the thighs down. Xiao Luo clung desperately to the waistband of her old black sweatpants to stop them slipping off, looking like a child wearing garments far too big for their frame. None of them had any undergarments at all. Stop letting useless thoughts cloud your mind. Jiang Chen shook his head hard to clear his racing thoughts. All right. He drew a deep breath and rubbed his palms over his face. I'll head out to find clothes. The girls' dormitory is the adjacent Block 7, not far from here. Don't be reckless. Tynan cut him off abruptly, striding forward. It's far too dangerous. The hallways are swarming with those biting monsters. I'm coming with you. You? Jiang Chen paused, scanning Tynan's current appearance from head to toe. Slender limbs, bare legs, feet stuffed into men's slippers several sizes too large. Tynan bristled at his straightforward stare, instinctively straightening her posture. What are you looking at? I've never backed down from a fight. Remember that brawl in the cafeteria freshman year? I took that chair blow for you. You can't even crack the plaster on the wall with a punch now, Jiang Chen replied bluntly. Stepping outside would get you hurt instantly. Tynan's expression shifted through multiple shades of anger and helplessness, her chest rising and falling rapidly. She bit her lower lip hard, let out an exasperated huff, then slumped onto a bed without another word. The atmosphere in the dorm grew suffocatingly heavy. No one contradicted Jiang Chen. His observation was an unarguable truth. I'll go alone. I'm smaller as a target and can move faster. Jiang Chen walked over to the collapsed metal bunk bed frame. He bent down, gripped a snapped hollow metal bed leg, and the muscles honed from amateur kickboxing tensed. With a low grunt, he tore the metal bar free, still attached to half a screw. The arm-thick iron rod had a jagged sharp edge from the break, heavy enough to serve as a makeshift weapon, capable of crushing a monster's skull if needed. Barricade the door solidly after I leave. Don't open it for anyone unless I knock 3 long raps followed by 1 short one. Jiang Chen hefted the rod to test its balance. Be careful, Chen. Xiao Luo shuffled over on small steps and grabbed the sleeve of his shirt. Her hands were tiny and ice cold. Jiang Chen glanced down. Her palms were fair and smooth, fingers delicate as fresh bamboo shoots, a stark contrast to his own forearms covered in rough skin and bulging veins. A surge of soft sympathy washed over him, quickly followed by awkward discomfort. This was Xiao Luo, the youngest of his 4 friends, the shut-in who would game for 12 hours straight and leave moldy instant noodle bowls untouched for days. He had to see her as his buddy, nothing else. Jiang Chen gently pried her cold hand off his sleeve, then gave her a firm pat on the head, just as he always had before. Wait here for me. The heavy tap tilted Xiao Luo's head to the side, rumpling her messy pale hair. Her ruby eyes instantly welled up, glistening with obvious hurt. Jiang Chen pretended not to notice. He tightened his grip on the iron rod and walked to the door. Taking a deep breath, he gestured for Tainan to shift the pile of broken tables and chairs blocking the entrance just enough to create a narrow gap. The wooden door creaked open a crack, wide enough for one person to slip sideways through. A thick wave of blood and rot flooded his nostrils, making his stomach churn violently. Gripping the rod tighter, Jiang Chen slipped out into the hallway. The sight that met his eyes sent a chill straight down his spine. Blood everywhere. The white walls of the 3rd-floor male dorm corridor were splattered and coated in dark red gore. Stains dripped down onto the floor and ceiling, pooling into sticky puddles on the cheap terrazzo surface. A cloying, Putrid stench hung thick in the air. Sharp metallic iron tang mixed with the sickly sweet rot of decomposing flesh. The nauseating scent burned his throat, and bitter acid rose to the back of his mouth. He forced it back down. 3 mangled shapes lay sprawled across the center of the corridor, barely recognizable as human bodies. The leftmost corpse had been eviscerated, intestines and organs dragged across the floor like discarded garbage. The middle one was only half a torso, flesh gnawed clean to bone on the thighs. The rightmost body remained mostly intact. Jiang Qin's gaze caught the graphic printed on its shirt, a limited edition black tee featuring one-piece artwork. It was Zhou Hao from room 306 next door. Just yesterday afternoon in the washroom, Zhou Hao had borrowed his shampoo. Now Zhou Hao lay in a pool of blood, a huge chunk of flesh torn from his neck, ragged bite marks lining the wound. His cervical vertebrae had been snapped, his head hanging crookedly off his shoulders, milky lifeless eyes fixed straight toward Jiang Qin. Jiang Qin forced his eyes away. Staring would only sap his courage. He pressed one palm flat against the wall, his other hand white-knuckled around the iron rod. Sweat slicked his palms, making the metal slippery to hold. The hallway was eerily silent. Normally this hour would ring with students shouting to rush to the washrooms or yelling through closed doors about online games. Now the only sounds were his own ragged breathing and the squelch of his shoes stepping through blood puddles. Where had all the biting monsters gone? Jiang Qin crept along the wall until he reached the open door of room 307. Its lock snapped clean off. He leaned halfway inside. The room was trashed, chairs overturned, wardrobe doors hanging open, blood splatters dotted across the lower bunk's blanket. No living people, no monsters. His eyes swept rapidly over the desk. Beside the keyboard on the right sat a half-empty pack of Oreos and 2 unopened bottles of Nongfu spring water. Holding his breath, he stepped lightly inside, scooping the cookies and water to stuff deep into the pockets of his baggy sweatpants. The plastic bottles clinked faintly against each other, and Jiang Qin froze completely, waiting 5 full seconds for any sign of movement. Nothing stirred. He backed out and continued creeping along the wall toward the stairwell, the only way down to the ground floor. Jiang Qin peeked his head around the corner, peering through the stairwell gap to the second-floor corridor. 2 shambling figures in pajamas wandered back and forth. Their movements were rigid, knees locked straight, feet dragging across the floor like puppets pulled by invisible strings. One creature wore plaid sleep pants, its left arm severed at the elbow. Bleached white bone and blackened tendons jutted from the stump, swinging wildly as it shuffled forward. These were the monsters overrunning the campus. Jiang Qin's grip on the iron rod faltered, cold sweat dripping down his forehead. He ducked back, tucked the rod under one arm, and wiped his damp palms hard against his trousers before re-grasping the weapon. The stairs were impassable. 2 monsters blocked the only route down, and he stood no chance fighting both alone. Jiang Qin turned toward the windows at the far end of the corridor. They were on the 3rd floor. The lawn below was a short drop, enough to sprain an ankle at worst, not kill him. But a full-sized basketball court separated the male dormitory block from the female dormitory next door. He stepped to the window and squinted through the grimy glass. A curse slipped out under his breath. The basketball court teemed with monsters, at least 15 or 20 of them, wandering aimlessly, low gurgling growls rumbling in their throats. A massive figure lingered beneath the hoop, clad in the blue uniform of the campus security guard. The guard had easily weighed 200 kilograms in life, and as a monster, he cut an even more intimidating silhouette. He squatted on the pavement, tearing at something on the ground, strips of flesh hanging from his jaws. Jumping down and charging across the court would get him surrounded instantly. Jiang Qin stepped back, mentally mapping the layout of the dorm block. The main lobby on the ground floor was a wide open space, undoubtedly swarming with monsters by now. What other path was there? The connecting walkway. The school had built a fully enclosed fire escape corridor linking the 3rd floors of the male Block 6 and female Block 7 the previous year, as part of fire safety renovations. Jiang Qin spun around and hurried toward the opposite end of the hallway. He paused to search 2 half-open dorm rooms along the way, looting supplies just as he had in room 307. Luck favored him. A pack of Shuanghui ham sausages, 3 bottles of mineral water, an unexpired bag of mini bread rolls, and a relatively clean dry towel torn from a washstand rack. He stuffed everything into his pockets and tucked extra supplies against his chest. The bulk of provisions weighed him down, but the knowledge of having food bolstered his resolve. The entrance to the connecting walkway was a pair of red double-fire doors, unlocked. Jiang Qin pressed his ear to the metal sheet. Listening closely, only faint wind whistled through the space beyond. He gripped the handle, pushed it ajar just wide enough for one person to slip through, and leaned his head in to survey the corridor. The 10-meter enclosed passage was lined with louvered windows, spotlessly clean with no blood or wandering corpses anywhere. The opposite end opened onto the female dormitory's third-floor fire doors. Jiang Chen slipped inside and pulled the door shut behind him. He hunched low, moving quickly on the walkway, then pushed open the far door to step into the female dorm hallway. The scene here was far less gruesome than the male block. No large splatters of blood stained the walls, no dismembered bodies littered the floor. Only faint drag marks of dried blood streaked along the ground. Jiang Chen passed multiple dorm rooms, every door firmly locked from the inside. As he walked past room 312, soft muffled sobbing drifted out, accompanied by the scrape of heavy furniture pushed against the door. Survivors were hiding inside. Jiang Chen hesitated for a split second, but kept walking. He could barely keep his own 3 friends safe. He had no capacity to help strangers. His sole mission here was clear: find clothes for his 3 friends, whose bodies had transformed overnight and left them without properly fitting garments. He cursed silently to himself. For years studying engineering at this university, and he'd never once set foot on the female dorm stairs. Now his first time inside the girls' block was to scavenge women's clothing for his best friends. The world truly had gone mad. Jiang Chen reached the middle of the hallway. The door to room 315 hung slightly ajar, its lock dented and broken from a hard blow. He pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was ransacked, drawers pulled out, textbooks and cosmetics scattered across the floor. Yet no blood or signs of a struggle. The occupants must have fled at the very start of the catastrophe, for wardrobes lined the walls, 2 on each side. The left pair stood open, clothes torn and strewn everywhere, while the right 2 remained latched shut. Jiang Chen pulled open the first right wardrobe, and a faint laundry detergent scent wafted out, revealing rows of women's garments hanging neatly inside. He sorted through them quickly, selecting 2 elastic waist sweatpants, 2 hooded sweatshirts, and 1 loose black outer jacket. His gaze drifted to the drawers beneath the hanging clothes. He pulled one open, revealing stacks of folded undergarments laid out neatly. Jiang Chen froze, his hand hovering midair. At 22 years old, he'd barely held a girl's hand before, and now he was rummaging through undergarments. This was something he never would have dreamed of doing 24 hours prior. He gritted his teeth. There was no time for embarrassment. Su Qingya had nothing covering her legs, and Tainan's makeshift outfit offered minimal coverage at best. He reached into the drawer, recalling each friend's frame. Su Qingya was tall, retaining much of her original bone structure, so he picked 2 larger-sized supportive tops suited to her frame. As for Tainan, Jiang Chen's mind flashed back to how tightly her jersey had stretched across her torso earlier, so he dug out 2 maximum-size sports bras. Xiao Luo was small and slender with a delicate frame, so he grabbed one of the smallest sizes available. With tops and bottoms secured, he also stuffed several pairs of black leggings into his pile. He shut the drawer and headed off to find a bag to pack everything away. His gaze drifted to a storage box at the very bottom of the cabinet. Inside lay several packs wrapped in pink plastic packaging. Sanitary pads. Jiang Chen froze on the spot. Old Su's words from that morning echoed in his head. Their entire physical physiology had been completely altered. The chance of this change being permanent was over 90%, which meant one thing. All 3 of them now possessed fully female bodily structures. Naturally, monthly menstrual cycles would come along with this transformation. A chill ran down Jiang Chen's spine. He grabbed a large plastic shopping bag printed with a supermarket logo and tossed all the sanitary pads inside without hesitation. Clothes, food, water, he filled the bag to the brim. Time to get back. The trip back was far less smooth than the journey over. No sooner had Jiang Chen stepped out of the girls' dormitory building than he heard heavy dragging noises echoing up the stairwell at the end of the hallway. Something was climbing the stairs. It was accompanied by ragged, labored breathing and the scraping sound of bones dragging across concrete flooring. Jiang Chen quickened his pace at once, rushing 3 steps at a time into the connecting walkway. He crossed the passage and pushed open the fire door leading to the boys' dormitory block. He sprinted all the way to the door of room 301. The stench of blood grew thicker the closer he got. Not daring to linger, he rapped on the door in their prearranged signal. 2 short knocks followed by 1 long one. Shuffling furniture sounded from the other side of the door. Seconds later, a narrow crack opened up. Jiang Chen slipped sideways through the gap, and Iron Man slammed the door shut and braced it solidly behind him. Leaning against the wall, Jiang Chen dropped the overstuffed plastic bag to the floor and gasped for breath. I found supplies. Little Luo and Iron Man crowded around immediately. Su Qingya stayed seated on her lower bunk as before, not moving closer, yet her eyes remained fixed firmly on the bag. Iron Man knelt down and ripped open the plastic bag. The sanitary pads wrapped in pink packaging sat right on top. Her hand froze mid-air. She held one pack up and stared at it for 2 full seconds before spinning sharply to glare at Jiang Chun. Every feature on her sharply striking face twisted with unease. Jiang Chun crouched beside her, pulling out ham sausages and bread from his pockets one by one, avoiding her gaze entirely. Better safe than sorry, Jiang Chun muttered, staring at a mineral water bottle in his grasp. Iron Man said nothing. She roughly tossed the pack of sanitary pads into the farthest corner of the bag with a dull thud, then kept digging through the supplies. Next, she pulled out several sets of undergarments. Iron Man lifted one extra-large sports bra by its shoulder straps, her expression a tangled mess of frustration, resentment, and refusal to accept their new reality. She stared at the garment for a long moment. "This thing's way too big," Iron Man ground out through gritted teeth. Jiang Chun set the last bottle of water down on the floor and stood upright. His eyes darted briefly over her torso before his eyelid twitched violently. "Take a look at your frame yourself," Jiang Chun shot back bluntly. "A smaller size wouldn't fit properly." Iron Man glanced down at her stretched-out 3XL basketball tank top, its fabric strained tight against her new physique. She fell silent without a word, clutching the sports bra in one fist and grabbing a pair of sweatpants and a hoodie with her other hand. Su Qingya stepped forward. She picked out several sets of clothes and undergarments sized to fit her frame from the bag without a single unnecessary comment. Turning to face the wall with her back toward Jiang Chun, she quickly shed her oversized, ill-fitting t-shirt. She moved as fast as she could, desperate to escape her uncomfortable original clothes as soon as possible. Jiang Chun spun around instantly, standing facing the wooden door. The soft rustle of fabric shifting drifted over from behind him. "Brother Chun, you have to turn all the way around too." Little Luo's soft voice called out, tinged with anxiety. Jiang Chun stared at the dented, scuffed door panel. "I'm already turned around." "Then stop listening so closely," Little Luo shouted. Jiang Chun bit back an irritated retort. "How am I supposed to stop my ears from picking up sound? I can't fold them flat against my head. Just don't pay attention to what you hear." "I'm not listening." Jiang Chun gritted his teeth, staring at the faint red glow seeping through the crack beneath the door. 5 minutes stretched by. To Jiang Chun, those 5 minutes felt more torturous than facing hordes of undead in the hallway. "We're finished," Su Qingya's calm voice broke the silence. Jiang Chun exhaled in relief and turned back around. All 3 of them had changed into the women's clothing they'd retrieved. Su Qingya wore a gray hooded sweatshirt and black jogger pants, wrapped head to toe in loose layers. Paired with her cold, aloof expression, she radiated an aura that warned others to keep their distance. Little Luo was dressed in an oversized white lightweight jacket with leggings underneath, looking just like a high school student. Jiang Chun's gaze finally landed on Iron Man. She wore a black hoodie, hands stuffed deep into its pockets, standing with the same wide, unrefined stance she'd always had. Jiang Chun glanced at her for a split second before jerking his eyes upward toward the ceiling. "What's wrong?" Iron Man caught his odd reaction instantly and frowned in confusion. Jiang Chun rubbed his palms over his face, his voice rough. "Nothing," he said, gesturing vaguely toward her chest. "Just pull your hoodie zipper up higher." Iron Man glanced down. The zipper only reached halfway up her torso, leaving the sports bra underneath exposed, the fabric unable to fully cover her altered frame. "Damn it." Iron Man hauled the zipper all the way to the top in one sharp tug, nearly catching her chin in the fastener from the force. And so their first day in this transformed state drew to a close. They reinforced all the furniture they'd stacked to block the door once more. Jiang Chun dug a rusty pair of needle-nose pliers out from the wreckage, straightening lengths of wire salvaged from broken clothes hangers. He knelt behind the door, winding the wire tight around the legs of a dented metal cabinet and the door bolt, looping the metal over a dozen times until the wire stretched taut as a wire cable. The pliers squeaked against the metal with every twist. Only once he'd secured it completely did he stop. He gave the doorknob a hard tug. The door didn't shift an inch. Sweat soaked through his shirt by the time he finished. They rationed out their remaining food and water. Half a case of instant noodles, 2 bottles of mineral water. Each person got 1 pack of dry noodles per day, eaten plain without boiling water. The 2 bottles of water were split 4 ways. Each time they drank, they only brushed their lips against the bottle mouth, dividing their small portion into 3 separate sips. At this rate, their supplies would last them a maximum of 3 days. Jiang Chun took the first night watch shift. He sat by the door, leaning back against the dented metal cabinet they'd used to barricade the entrance. An iron pipe rested across his knees, his hand wrapped firmly around one end at all times. The cold tile seeped through his trousers, creeping upward along his legs. The other three slept inside the dorm room. Su Qingya and little Luo squeezed together on the only intact lower bunk bed. The bed frame creaked softly every now and then under their weight. Iron Man found the shared bed too cramped, so she spread a tattered blanket across the floor and stretched out across it, one leg draped over the edge of the bunk. The hem of her basketball tank top rode up to her ribs. Jiang Chen glanced over once before quickly looking away. Moonlight filtered through the half-collapsed ceiling, tinged the same crimson red as before, though less glaring than the night prior. Jiang Chen lay awake in the darkness, his mind racing nonstop. Their food would run out in 3 days, and their water would be gone even sooner. What would they do afterward? The undead outside seemed sensitive to both sound and scent. In daylight, they moved sluggishly, slow and uncoordinated under the sun's glow. After dark, they grew far more active, throwing their full weight against doors with far greater force. There was no way they could risk venturing out at night. At least 5 or 6 of the creatures lingered around the stairwell landing between room 302 and the ground floor. He'd peeked through the door crack earlier that day and seen nothing but gnawed bone fragments and tattered rags scattered across the stairs. The school supermarket sat on the first floor of the complex building, roughly 500 meters away on foot. But the entire stretch between dorm and supermarket was open playground, completely devoid of cover. The moment they stepped outside the dormitory building, every undead creature across the plaza would swarm them. He needed to venture out to gather more supplies. The meager scraps he'd scavenged from the empty dorm rooms that day wouldn't sustain them for long. They had to make their way downstairs eventually. Where could they find more provisions? The dorm supervisor's office on the ground floor might hold spare bottled water and instant noodles. Alternatively, they could break open the vending machines on the second floor. The metal cabinets inside the machines could be stripped apart and used as makeshift shields. Another problem weighed on his mind. Jiang Chen's eyes drifted toward the bunk bed. In the dim moonlight, he could see Su Qingya's loose black hair spread across the yellowed pillow, and little Luo's small, curled form wrapped tightly in blankets, only a wisp of pale hair sticking out from the folds. Their physical strength was nearly non-existent now. Su Qingya possessed slightly more stamina than an average woman, but her endurance was still severely limited. She'd grown winded just moving a single chair earlier that day. Iron Man still retained some of her old athletic toughness, but her altered center of gravity threw off all her balance. Making her movements clumsy compared to before, she stumbled if she leaned, even slightly off kilter. Little Luo fared worst of all, barely steady on her feet, even with a light breeze blowing through the broken windows. Her legs shook just standing upright during the day. Once, the 4 of them could walk anywhere on campus unchallenged, never backing down from a fight. Now, only he remained capable of defending the group. He glanced again at the 3 sleeping figures around him. A plan needed to be formed. Tomorrow, they'd head up to the 4th floor to search for bladed weapons or protective gear, art students' craft knives, or knee and wrist guards from the sports department. Binding textbooks to their forearms with packing tape could also serve as a crude barrier against bites. Around 2 in the early morning, a strange noise jolted Jiang Chen awake. He hadn't realized he'd drifted off leaning against the cabinet, leaving his neck stiff and aching. The sound didn't come from outside the door. It originated inside the dorm room. Rapid, strained gasps echoed from the bunk bed, like someone trapped in a nightmare, each inhale sharp and shallow, their lungs wheezing as if pulling air through a rusted bellows. A dull thud followed immediately afterward. Someone had fallen off the bed, crashing onto tile littered with shattered glass shards. Jiang Chen shot upright in an instant, grabbing his iron pipe and fumbling to switch on his phone with his free hand. The screen's pale light swept across the room, landing on Su Qingya crumpled on the floor. She curled inward like a shrimp, both arms clamped tight over her lower abdomen, her knuckles white from the crushing grip. Her face drained completely of color, her lips tinged a sickly blue-gray. Sweat beads the size of soybeans dotted her forehead, her hair sticking in damp clumps to her skin. Old Su, Jiang Chen tossed the pipe aside and lunged toward her, grabbing her shoulders. Her skin felt shockingly cold beneath his palms, icy even through her loose gray sweatshirt. Su Qingya offered no response. Her jaw clamped shut, so tight her teeth ground together, soft, muffled whimpers escaping her throat. It wasn't ordinary pain. She hurt far too badly to even cry out. Su Qingya, talk to me. Old Su, Iron Man jolted awake, scrambling to her feet and nearly tripping over splintered wood scattered across the floor. Little Luo poked her head out from the bunk bed, her pale hair a messy tangle around her face. Her skin's freezing. Little Luo brushed a finger against Su Qingya's arm and pulled back sharply. It's like touching the inside of a freezer. Jiang Chun pressed his palm to Su Qingya's forehead. The truth hit him instantly. Her body temperature plummeting rapidly. A thin layer of frost even coated her skin, tiny ice crystals dusting her eyelashes. Old Su, say something. Where does it hurt? Panic surged through Jiang Chun, his grip tightening unconsciously on her shoulders. Su Qingya finally forced broken words past her gritted teeth. My stomach, her lower abdomen, the spot she'd been clutching desperately. Jiang Chen's mind raced to piece together the symptoms. Rapidly dropping body temperature, crippling abdominal pain, cold sweats, total physical collapse. If a woman displayed these symptoms normally, his first thought would be severe menstrual cramps brought on by their new physiology. But no standard cramp could drain so much heat from a person that frost formed on their skin, cooling the surrounding air as well. Whatever this affliction was, her dangerously low temperature would kill her if it dropped any further. Iron Man, grab every blanket we have, all of them. Iron Man moved without hesitation, yanking every cover off the bunk bed, even the tattered one she'd been using as a mat on the floor. Jiang Chun wrapped Su Qingya in 3 thick layers of fabric, bundling her tightly like a rice dumpling. It did nothing to warm her. Less than 10 seconds after covering her, the blankets turned ice cold, their cotton stuffing rigid with chill, as if Su Qingya's body radiated endless frigid energy outward. Little Luo hugged her own arms tight to her chest, her teeth chattering uncontrollably. Brother Chun, it's freezing in here. She's lowering the whole room's temperature. Su Qingya trembled harder beneath the blankets, her lips darkening from blue to purple, her eyes rolling back in her head to expose wide swathes of white sclera. It was the telltale sign of impending shock. A heavy dread settled in Jiang Chen's chest. He had no way to treat her. No heating source, no hot water. Their kettle had shattered during the undead's earlier assault on the door, all spilled water long evaporated. No medicine, no supplies of any kind in this wrecked dormitory. There was only one thing left he could try. Jiang Chun lifted the edge of the blanket and slipped inside, wrapping his entire body around Su Qingya from behind, holding her locked firmly against his chest. Su Qingya's frame was as cold as a corpse, the piercing chill seeping through thin layers of clothing to prickle every bone beneath his skin. Jiang Chun gritted his teeth, channeling all his own body heat into her. His chest pressed flat against her back, his arms wrapped securely around her waist, his chin resting atop her head. He tangled his legs around hers as well, trapping her icy limbs between his own. Their bodies pressed flush through the thin fabric separating them. What are you doing? Iron Man shouted in shock, eyes wide as saucers. Her temperature will drop fatal levels otherwise. Jiang Chen snapped without lifting his head. Do you have a better idea? Iron Man opened her mouth to retort, but found no words, running a frustrated hand roughly through her short hair until it stood messy on end. She paced 2 tight circles across the floor, kicking an empty mineral water bottle aside hard, then leaned against the wall, her chest heaving with unspoken agitation. Su Qingya shook violently in his embrace for several minutes before the trembling gradually faded, the extreme cold radiating off her body slowly receding as if neutralized by his warmth. Jiang Chun noticed a strange shift within himself, his own body heat spiking rapidly. It was as if he'd transformed into a living heater, pouring endless warmth outward without feeling cold himself. Something unnatural was stirring inside his bloodstream, spreading from his chest to every limb, a gentle warmth rushing through his veins like a strong shot of liquor settling in his stomach. His palms resting over Su Qingya's abdomen radiated steady heat, like a reusable heating pad. Had he undergone a separate mutation? The others had been altered into female forms, while he'd become a living source of warmth. It was an absurd twist of fate, yet exactly what they needed to save her life. Roughly 20 minutes passed. Su Qingya's convulsions stopped entirely. Her breathing steadied into slow, even rises and falls. The purple hue fading from her lips to gray-blue, then softening back to a faint pink flush. Her temperature remained below normal, but she no longer radiated lethal cold. The thin frost coating her skin melted into tiny droplets of water. Jiang Chun didn't loosen his hold, fearing her body might plunge back into hypothermia if he let go. Su Qingya shifted gently in his arms, her back brushing against his chest. Jiang Chun. Her voice came soft and hoarse, her vocal cords stiff as though only just thawed from freezing temperatures. I'm here. Let me go. Su Qingya's hands pushed weakly at his forearms. Unable to break his grip. Your body hasn't warmed back up fully yet. Jiang Chun refused to move. Silence hung thick in the dark for several heartbeats. Promise you won't tell anyone about this, Su Qingya murmured, her voice dropping to a near whisper. All right, Jiang Chen agreed instantly, mentally writing it off as nothing different than sharing body warmth to thaw a freezing friend back in their old dorm days. Jiang Chen closed his eyes, his chin still resting lightly atop Su Qingya's hair. Strands of dark hair brushed against his nose, carrying a faint, clean scent, not the cheap shampoo mixed with sweat he'd known before, but something crisp and fresh, like the first snowfall of winter. Her waist felt narrow and soft beneath his arms, fitting neatly within his embrace. A stray, fleeting thought flickered through his mind before he forced it away at once. This was old Su, his roommate who'd sat shirtless gaming in their dorm room just yesterday, the same guy whose foot odor could chase flies out of the room, who'd slur instant noodles while yelling insults at video game opponents. He was still his brother, no matter how his outward form had shifted. They lived in the middle of an undead apocalypse, ravenous monsters roaming outside their barricaded door. Dwelling on pointless, distracting thoughts would only get them all killed. He needed to stay focused, level-headed. Iron Man knelt on the floor beside them, her expression unreadable as she stared at the two wrapped together beneath the blanket, her jaw tight with suppressed emotion. After watching for a long stretch, she clicked her tongue and stood, walking over to the broken window to stare out into the night, picking absently at peeling paint on the wall. Little Luo huddled in the corner of the lower bunk, knees drawn tight to her chest. Her eyes glowed faintly red in the darkness, blinking like two polished crimson marbles as she sat lost in quiet thought. Jiang Chen glanced at the time displayed on his phone screen, 2:40 in the morning. His mind returned to mapping out their route to the 4th floor for the next day's search. He'd bring the rusty needle-nose pliers. If they encountered a lone undead creature, he'd strike its knee joints to shatter bone, crippling its ability to chase them. Just then, a faint, fragile voice drifted down the hallway outside the dorm door. Help me. Su Qingya's painful episode had passed quickly, yet it left a heavy shadow hanging over every one of them. By the following daylight hours, she appeared mostly recovered, her complexion still pale, but stable enough to sit upright and hold a conversation. No one brought up the events of the previous night, though none could forget them. Jiang Chen knew this wouldn't be the last time she suffered such an attack. Midday proved his suspicion correct, when Iron Man suddenly grew unwell as the four of them sat sorting their remaining half-case of instant noodles and ham sausages amid the dorm's wreckage. Iron Man sat cross-legged on the floor, half peeling a ham sausage and lifting it toward her mouth when her hand jerked violently out of nowhere. The sausage slipped from her grasp, landing atop dust-covered broken tile. Iron Man stared blankly at the discarded food, then down at her own right hand. Her fingers trembled uncontrollably. She bent to pick up the sausage, froze halfway, then sat upright again, a strange, distant look on her face. What's wrong? Jiang Chun paused mid-chew, his gaze locked on her shaking hand. Nothing. Iron Man waved the concern away, tucking her hand back inside her oversized basketball tank top. Just feeling really cold. It was June, the height of the southern summer. Even beneath the eerie crimson glow of the apocalyptic sky, temperatures hovered around 30 degrees Celsius. For Iron Man to claim she felt cold sent a heavy weight sinking into Jiang Chen's heart. He turned his head to look at Su Qingya. She sat on the edge of the lower bunk bed, holding half a flatbread in her hand. She paused what she was doing and lifted her eyes. They exchanged a glance and reached the exact same conclusion. Whatever had plagued them the previous night was coming again. Tainan, come here. Jiang Chun set down the flatbread in his hands. What's up? Tainan was still sitting on the floor, rubbing her arms. Come over so I can check your temperature. Reluctantly, Tainan stood and walked over to him. Jiang Chun raised a hand and pressed his palm to her forehead. Her skin was cold. Not as drastically frigid as Su Qingya's had been the night before, but far below normal human temperature. A bone-deep chill seeped out from beneath her skin. Jiang Chun pulled his hand away and walked over to Xiao Luo next. Xiao Luo huddled in the corner with her knees drawn to her chest, gnawing on a ham sausage. Without a word, Jiang Chun placed his palm against her forehead too. Cold as well. Slightly milder than Tainan's, but the strange cold had already taken hold. All three of them were afflicted, only the onset times varied. What even is this? Tainan frowned, watching Jiang Chen's movements. Radiation from that meteorite? Some side effect from us being transformed like this? I don't know. Jiang Chen stood straight, his mind racing as he sorted through clues. But one thing I'm certain of, last night when I held Lao Su, my body temperature stayed abnormal. I should have lost body heat and grown hypothermic, yet I felt fine. Instead, endless warmth flowed out of me and into her. Su Qingya looked up at him, a glint flickering behind her glasses. You mean your body heat can suppress this strange condition? Exactly. Jiang Chen thought for a second, then turned to Tai Nan. Did you touch Lao Su last night? Yeah. I brushed against her when covering her with a blanket. Did you feel any warmth draining out of you? Tai Nan thought it over. Nope. Just the usual shock of how icy cold she was. So only he possessed this unique trait. Jiang Chen clenched his fist. He could feel his palms running far warmer than an average person's. A steady, abundant warmth surged from his chest all the way to his fingers. What if all three of you flare up at the same time? He voiced the most pressing, realistic worry hanging over them. Silence settled over the dorm room for several heartbeats. If all three suffered simultaneous episodes, he was only one person with two hands. There was no way to stabilize everyone at once. Xiao Luo raised her hand. Then take turns relying on your warmth. This isn't a joke. Jiang Chun creased his brows into a deep furrow. I'm not joking at all. Xiao Luo's red eyes were dead serious, a tuft of white hair sticking up atop her head. If your body heat can save our lives, then that's all that matters. We're all brothers. There's no need to overthink physical contact. Jiang Chen stared at the earnest expression on Xiao Luo's delicate, youthful face, unsure how to respond. We're all brothers. She meant every word of it. To her, he was just the same brother Chun who'd queued up with her to play online games every day. Yet a conflicted thought lingered in his mind. He was a regular 20-year-old young man, and he would have to hold each of them for hours on end through thin clothing. The predicament weighed heavily on him. There's another point to consider. Su Qingya's voice cut through his tangled thoughts. She pushed her half-shattered glasses up the bridge of her nose. How long did you hold me last night before my symptoms eased? About 20 minutes, Jiang Chen recalled. What if the next attack is far worse? What if 20 minutes isn't enough? Then I'll keep holding you until your symptoms fade completely. Jiang Chen blurted out without hesitation. The words left his mouth before he could filter them. His mind had only fixated on saving her, no extra thought involved. Su Qingya stared at him with complicated eyes, then turned her face away, her tone sharp and distant. I won't accept that. I can endure it on my own next time. You nearly lost consciousness last night. Do you realize that? Frustration flared in Jiang Chen. How could she be this stubborn? It's still better than being held by you. Tai Nan let out a scoff from the side. Lao Su, why cling to your pride when your life's on the line? Stay out of this. Su Qingya didn't spare her a glance. I won't stay quiet. If you'd actually died last night. I told you to be quiet. Su Qingya's tone dropped several degrees colder. Jiang Chun massaged his temples. He understood Su Qingya perfectly. Out of the four of them, she had the strongest sense of self-respect. An only child, she'd excelled at everything her entire life. Transforming from a towering 1.8-meter man into this fragile form had already shattered her entire sense of self. Now she faced relying on another man's embrace just to survive. For her, that humiliation felt worse than death itself. But Jiang Chun prioritized survival over her wounded pride, no matter how she felt. Lao Su, listen to me. Jiang Chun strode forward, knelt in front of her, and met her gaze at eye level. Su Qingya shrank back, pressing her spine flat against the wall. You can hold on to your dignity all you want, but if you throw your life away for pride, what am I supposed to do? Jiang Chun locked eyes with her, his voice quiet, yet heavy with gravity. Su Qingya held his stare. Beneath her cold gaze swirled tangled conflict, anger, and a vulnerable side she tried desperately to hide from everyone. We will find a way to reverse this transformation. Jiang Chun softened his tone. But the prerequisite is that you stay alive. If you die here, we won't even get the chance to search for a cure. Su Qingya fell silent for a long stretch, the air in the dorm thick and stagnant. At last, she shifted her gaze to the dark crimson sky, her voice barely audible. Do whatever you must. Jiang Chen stood, releasing a quiet breath of relief. Trouble surfaced that afternoon. Tainan's symptoms took a sharp turn for the worse. Unlike Su Qingya's sudden violent episode the night prior, Tainan's cold crept up on her gradually. First her hands and feet turned icy, then her lips darkened. By 3 in the afternoon, her entire body shook with uncontrollable tremors. Jiang Chun. Tainan wrapped her arms tight around herself, her teeth chattering loudly. I don't think I can hold on much longer. Jiang Chun rushed over in 2 long strides and grabbed her wrist. Ice cold, identical to how Su Qingya had felt the night before. He pressed his palm fully against her skin, and the warmth trapped inside him immediately began flowing outward. Tainan's shaking lessened slightly, but did not stop entirely. The bone-deep cold counteracted the heat from his palms. This isn't enough, Jiang Chen assessed quickly. The surface area of a wrist was too small to transfer sufficient warmth. He lifted Tai Nan's hand and pressed it to his neck, where the carotid pulse carried the warmest core body heat. The moment her palm made contact, Jiang Chen shuddered. Her skin was soft and smooth, a stark contrast to the rough, calloused palms he remembered from their old basketball games. Now her hands were cold and delicate against his neck. Ah, this warmth helps. Tai Nan leaned closer, pressing her other hand to his neck as well. Jiang Chen stiffened. She was far too near. The zipper of her oversized hoodie only pulled halfway up. The loose collar gaped open as she leaned forward, exposing a stretch of skin across her chest. He forced his gaze upward to stare at the ceiling, refocusing his mind on their predicament. Is this helping yet? He ground out the question between tight teeth. Just a little longer. Tai Nan's cool breath fanned across his jaw. Before Jiang Chen could respond, Su Qingya spoke up abruptly. Blood. Jiang Chen and Tai Nan both twisted to look at her. Su Qingya sat on the bed edge, her expression calm and analytical, as if dissecting a mathematical equation. Last night you held Lao Su for 20 minutes to ease her symptoms. Touching your skin only slows Tai Nan's cold with minimal effect. That proves surface contact is inefficient. She paused, adjusting her broken glasses. But what if we use your blood instead? Jiang Chen caught onto her line of reasoning instantly. You're saying, have her drink my blood? Your abnormal body heat stems from your internal physiology. Blood is the primary carrier of core temperature. Warmth delivered internally would work exponentially faster than surface skin contact. Su Qingyao laid out her logical analysis clearly. Tai Nan pulled her hands away and stepped back, her face twisted with revulsion. Drink blood? I'm not some bloodsucker. Do you want to live or not? Su Qingyao shot her a glance. Tai Nan fell silent, crossing her arms as fresh tremors racked her frame. The blue-gray tint on her lips deepened by the second. Jiang Chen glanced down at his hands, then spotted a rust-stained utility knife half buried in the rubble nearby. He walked over and picked it up. He lined the edge against the pad of his left index finger. He pressed down hard and sliced. The dull blade tugged at his skin as it cut, a dull twinge of pain flaring up. Bright red beads of blood welled to the surface, stark against the dim crimson light filtering into the room. Jiang Chen held his bleeding finger out toward Tai Nan. Tai Nan stared at his outstretched hand, pure disgust etched across her features. Back before the meteor struck, she'd refused to share water bottles with anyone, repulsed by the thought of indirect contact. The idea of drinking blood repelled her deeply, yet her body shook harder with every passing second, her knees knocking together unsteadily. The frigid cold seeping out of her bones was slowly freezing her mind over. Will you take it? Jiang Chen asked, thick drops of blood dripping from his fingertip. Tai Nan ground her teeth, her eyes glistening. She lunged forward suddenly, snatched his finger tight in her grasp, and brought it to her mouth. The second Tai Nan's lips closed around his fingertip, Jiang Chen's mind went blank for a split second. Her mouth was soft, warm, and damp against his skin. He instinctively tried to pull his hand away, but Tai Nan's grip held firm. He could clearly feel the cold tremors racking her body subside the instant blood flowed from his wound into her mouth. The hand wrapped around his wrist steadily regained warmth, minute by minute. 3 seconds. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. Tai Nan released his finger, swiping her tongue across her lips. Her expression warred between revulsion and quiet relief. Once, she'd refused to share drinks with teammates after basketball practice, and now she'd drunk her friend's blood. Every muscle in her face tensed. How do you feel? Su Qingya asked, focused solely on her physical symptoms. The cold's gone. Tai Nan stepped back 2 paces, scrubbing hard at her mouth with the back of her hand. God, that tastes terrible, all metallic. Jiang Chen glanced down at his finger. The cut had already stopped bleeding. His skin healed far faster than an ordinary human's. He squeezed the pad of his finger, not even a scab forming over the wound. Before the meteor hit, scrapes from sparring practice took a full day or 2 to crust over. This wound sealed itself in seconds. It seemed the meteor that crashed through their dorm hadn't only transformed his 3 roommates into women. It had drastically altered his own physiology as well. What was he now? A walking source of constant warmth with rapid self-healing? He needed to test the limits of this ability. However, slicing open major arteries to experiment was far too reckless with their current survival hanging in the balance. Internal blood transfer is vastly more efficient, Su Qingya concluded. Her eyes locked on Jiang Chen's healed fingertip as she pushed her cracked glasses into place. Only a few drops were enough to stabilize her. Blood transports heat and life energy directly into the body's core. Its effects are at least 10 times faster than simple skin contact. So this is how we'll handle every flare-up from now on. Tainan's voice carried distaste. Every time the cold hits, I have to drink your blood? This is absurd. Do you have a better alternative? Jiang Chen countered. Tainan fell silent, raking a frustrated hand through her hair before dropping heavily onto a pile of broken bricks. Xiao Luo squatted nearby, her red eyes darting. She finished the last bite of her ham sausage and licked her fingers clean. What about me? Will I need to drink blood too when I get cold? We'll judge based on your symptoms, Jiang Chen replied. Your cold episodes have been the mildest so far. Surface warmth contact might be enough. Okay, Xiao Luo answered calmly, as casually as if discussing what they'd eat for dinner that night. Jiang Chen leaned back against the wall and rehashed everything they'd learned in his head. Holding Su Qingya had worked, and giving Tainan blood had stabilized her far quicker. His blood could fully suppress their strange cold sickness, while skin contact only offered slow, partial relief. That meant physical closeness between him and the three former roommates would only grow more frequent as time passed, and their cold episodes were clearly accelerating in frequency. A quiet, uneasy thought lingered in his mind. This situation was unnatural, completely out of the ordinary. These three had been his dorm brothers just one day prior, young men who'd bickered over instant noodles and stayed up all night gaming shirtless together. Now transformed, forced to rely on constant close contact, and even his blood to stay alive. It was an impossible, surreal mess. But another, louder thought cut through the unease. Could he stand by and watch them freeze to death? There was no other choice. That night, their crisis escalated further. At 3 in the morning, Xiao Luo's cold episode struck. Jiang Chun had been keeping watch, leaning against the dorm door and mapping out their travel route for the next day, when he caught the faint clatter of chattering teeth. Unlike Su Qingya and Tainan's episodes, Xiao Luo's body temperature did not plummet drastically. Her primary symptom was violent convulsions. Curled in the corner of the lower bunk, she twitched silently, her teeth biting hard enough to split her lip open. Strands of white hair clung to her forehead, soaked through with cold sweat. Her nails dug deep gouges into her own arms as she clenched her fists tight. By the time Jiang Chen spotted her, blood streamed down her chin from her bitten lip, dripping onto her collarbone. Xiao Luo. He crossed the room in one stride and lifted her gently into his arms. She weighed shockingly little. Her small frame shook like a leaf caught in a gale, light enough for him to cradle entirely with one arm. She likely weighed less than 80 pounds now, frail as an empty husk. He pressed his palm to her forehead, cold, no frost forming, yet that same insidious bone-deep chill radiated off her skin. It's starting again. Tainan roused awake, her voice mixing worry and irritation. She sat up from her makeshift mat on the floor and rubbed her eyes. Jiang Chun wasted no time searching for the misplaced utility knife. He brought his left thumb to his mouth and bit down hard. Beads of blood welled up, and he held his thumb to Xiao Luo's parted lips. The instant her lips touched the blood, her convulsions slowed dramatically. Instinctively, she closed her mouth around his thumb, sucking gently like a small, vulnerable creature seeking warmth. Jiang Chen's heartbeat skipped a beat. Xiao Luo's eyes stayed shut, unclear if she was fully conscious. Her lips were small and soft against his rough thumb pad, an unexpected gentle sensation amid their harsh survival struggle. He glanced down at her face. Long eyelashes cast faint shadows under the dim crimson light. Her pale white hair spread across his forearm. He bit down on his own tongue to refocus his scattered thoughts. Pull yourself together. This was Xiao Luo, the youngest of their group, the kid who'd fought him over jungle red buffs every single game night. That's enough, he said firmly, pulling his thumb away. The small wound already itched as his body began healing itself instantly. He wrapped both arms fully around Xiao Luo instead, pulling her tight against his chest. She rested her head on his sternum, strands of white hair brushing his jawline, her breathing slowly evening out. But she did not wake, or chose not to stir even if she was conscious. Brother Chun, Xiao Luo's voice came muffled against his chest, faint as if filtered through water. You're so warm, MHM. Don't let go. I won't. Jiang Chen barely slept a wink after that night. Xiao Luo slept nestled in his arms until dawn. His arms went from aching to numb, then completely lost all sensation entirely. Yet he dared not shift his position. Every tiny movement made Xiao Luo's brows furrow, and the cold inside her threatened to resurface. He endured the stiffness without complaint. As sunlight peeked over the rubble at daybreak, Tainan's cold flared up again. Jiang Chun. Tainan's shaky voice echoed from the doorway. Still holding Xiao Luo securely in his arms, Jiang Chun turned his head to see her slumped against the wall. She was wrapping her arms tight around her torso, her lips once more darkening blue. Her oversized hoodie could not block the frigid cold pouring out of her body. "I'll handle this myself," Tainan gritted out, pushing herself shakily to her feet and shuffling toward him. She circled around behind Jiang Chun, sitting pressed flat against his back. Her arms wrapped around his waist from behind, her forehead resting heavy against the nape of his neck. "You're freezing cold." Jiang Chun shuddered at the sharp chill seeping through his clothes, as if a block of ice leaned against his spine. "Bear with it." Tainan's voice rumbled against his back. "I don't exactly want to cling to you either." Their current arrangement left him sandwiched between the two girls. Xiao Luo held safely in his front embrace. Tainan pressed solidly to his back, relying on his constant core warmth to fend off the cold. He acted as a shared heater for both of them at once. Su Qingya sat 2 meters away on the bunk edge, observing the trio with an impassive, calculating stare, as if analyzing a complex math problem. "You're not having an episode yet, Lao Su?" Jiang Chen asked. "Not for the moment. But you?" "I said I'm fine for now." Su Qingya's tone brooked no argument. She turned to face the wall, her back rigid and stiff. Jiang Chen stared at her straight, tense silhouette. She was far too proud to admit weakness. He spotted subtle tremors running through her shoulders, her knuckles white where she gripped the bed frame tight enough to crack the wood. Still, she refused to ask for help. When her cold became unbearable, she would inevitably need his blood as well. He silently wondered how much blood his body could safely produce and replenish each day. Jiang Chen closed his eyes, turning the grim logistics over in his mind. His current predicament bordered on absurdity. 2 women pressed against him to draw warmth and stay alive. Yet those 2 women were once his closest brothers. He could physically feel their warmth and the softness of their frames. Iron Man leaned against his back, and the distinct curve of her body was impossible to ignore. Xiao Luo curled up in his arms, her figure soft and pliable. But his mind screamed relentlessly that these were still Tainan and Xiao Luo. The clashing thoughts made his head throb unbearably. To make matters worse, their food supplies were nearly exhausted. Half a carton of instant noodles, 2 bottles of water, and a few packets of beef jerky would not sustain the 4 of them past noon that day. He had just donated blood earlier and spent the entire night acting as their source of heat. His body now ached with ravenous hunger. This extraordinary regenerative ability clearly burned massive amounts of calories to function. Without high-calorie food to replenish his energy, his body would eventually deplete itself completely. He had no choice but to venture out and scavenge for supplies that very day. At 10 in the morning, he handed Xiao Luo over to Tainan, telling her to hold the younger girl close. Though the 2 cold bodies huddled together could not restore their warmth, it would at least slow the deterioration of their conditions. After that, he double-checked their travel route with Su Qingya. The supermarket in the comprehensive building, 500 meters away. Su Qingya sat on the bed and traced a line across the dust-covered table with her finger. The path cuts through the walkway between the playground and the teaching building. Zombies move sluggishly during daylight hours, but we have no idea how many are out there. Are you confident you can make it? Jiang Chun stared at the drawn line. 500 meters. Normally, he could sprint that distance in a little over a minute. Now, the world outside was bathed in sickly red light, littered with severed limbs and mangled corpses. Greenery lined both sides of the walkway, blocking clear sight lines and leaving anyone traveling through vulnerable to being surrounded. "I have to go, confident or not," Jiang Chen said firmly. "If we run out of food, all 4 of us die here. Let me come with you. You stay and watch over them." Jiang Chen cut her off mid-sentence. "You'd only be a liability out there. You can barely run a few steps without gasping for breath right now." Su Qingya fixed her gaze on him, her lips parting as if to argue, yet she said nothing in the end. Instead, she tore a strip of fabric from a curtain and held it out to him. "Tie this around your arm to stem bleeding if you get hurt. If a zombie bites you, that won't happen." Jiang Chen picked up an iron rod. The previous day, he had searched several neighboring dorm rooms and found a small kitchen knife along with a carabiner. The blade's edge was slightly dulled, so he sharpened it repeatedly against the concrete floor. He secured the knife's hilt to one end of the hollow iron rod using the carabiner, then wrapped wire tightly around the joint dozens of times, twisting the wires loose and shut with pliers. He swung the makeshift spear through the air twice to test its balance. The weight was perfect. It could stab and bludgeon alike, far more effective than a plain metal pole. Against these slow-moving monsters, maintaining distance and striking straight for their heads was the safest strategy. "Wait for me to come back. Bar the door tightly behind me." He pushed open the dorm room door and stepped into the corridor, overwhelmed by a putrid stench the second he crossed the threshold. He knew exactly what awaited him outside this time. Only one zombie shuffled slowly at the far end. He needed to slip quietly across the connecting walkway to the women's dormitory staircase, a section he had scouted the day before and confirmed was relatively clear of undead. Jiang Chun drew a deep breath, gripping his weapon tightly, his footsteps light as a cat's. The zombie at the end of the corridor paid him no mind. He crossed the connecting walkway without incident and entered the women's dormitory stairwell. Crimson sunlight filtered through the windows, stretching long, distorted shadows across the concrete steps. He descended floor by floor, carefully avoiding shards of broken glass scattered across every tread, moving in complete silence to avoid drawing attention. One floor down, then two. He reached the landing between the first and second floors. The main entrance to the building stood just ahead. If he stepped outside and crossed the green belt, he would reach the central walkway. Without warning, a zombie lurched out from a shadowed corner straight toward him. Jiang Chun edged along the wall as he descended to the second floor. The air here reeked far stronger of blood than the third floor, with dark drag marks staining every tile. He had to keep moving without pause, lingering meant being trapped. Every door lining the hallway hung ajar, ready for a monster to burst out at any moment. His knuckles whitened around the iron bed-leg spear, blade pointed forward, the muscles in his arms coiled tight with tension. A creature suddenly charged out of the second-floor women's restroom. The wooden door crashed inward, its metal hinges snapping cleanly and clattering to the ground, the echo reverberating down the empty corridor. A female zombie wearing a floral nightgown barreled straight for him, a chunk of bloody entrails clamped between its jaws. Jiang Chen's body reacted faster than his mind could process the threat. Retreating was impossible. The wall behind him left nowhere to dodge, and one step back would let the monster tackle him to the concrete. Muscle memory forged from years of competitive kickboxing kicked in to save his life. He planted his feet firmly, twisting powerfully at the waist. He thrust the iron spear forward, driving the tip straight into the zombie's chest. It did not fall. The rod absorbed the full force of the creature's charge, yet its hands flailed wildly as it strained to reach him. Its jagged nail scraped Jiang Chen's forearm, slicing a shallow gash that burned with sharp pain. Damn it! Jiang Chun gritted his teeth and pushed harder. He needed to push the monster away before it could reach his neck. He shoved the zombie hard against the wall, bending the hollow metal rod beneath the string. The thin pipe could not withstand this level of force. If he struggled much longer, it would snap clean in two, leaving him defenseless in the confined hallway to face certain death. Jiang Chun lifted one leg and drove his boot into the zombie's knee joint. A sickening crack echoed as bone splintered. The creature crumpled downward, losing its balance. Jiang Chun pulled the spear free and swung it backward in a brutal counterblow, slamming the metal end against the zombie's temple. Once, twice, 3 times. He had to crush its skull completely, or it would drag itself back to its feet to attack again. On the third strike, the undead's caved-in cranium sent it collapsing motionless to the floor, thick black blood seeping into the grout lines between the tiles. Jiang Chun leaned against the wall, gasping heavily as he stumbled back a couple paces to create a safe gap between himself and the corpse. The scratch on his arm oozed blood, though it was only superficial. He tore a strip of fabric from his shirt and wrapped it tightly. He knotted it securely. He could not tell if the laceration would become infected, but when he had given blood earlier that day, his wounds had closed rapidly. His body's powerful regenerative capacity should fight off any contamination. If it failed, there was nothing he could do to reverse it now. His heart hammered wildly in his chest, a constant high-pitched ringing filling his ears. This marked the first time he had ever killed a zombie with his own hands. The thing before him was no longer human, yet he knew he would never forget the gritty resistance of its skull beneath his weapon, or the violent vibration that traveled up the metal rod and into his palms. He had no time to dwell on the thought. The loud crash of the restroom door and the repeated blows would draw more undead to the corridor. He needed to flee immediately. Staying put meant being killed. He had to escape the dormitory building before additional zombies converged on his location. He quickened his pace down to the ground floor and slipped outside through the side fire exit. Harsh sunlight blinded him the moment he stepped into the open air. Fewer zombies wandered across the playground than he had spotted from the windows the previous day. Roughly 7 or 8 scattered across the expanse, shuffling slowly in aimless circles. It seemed the creatures truly grew far less active under daylight, a small relief amid the chaos. The comprehensive building stood on the opposite side of the playground, separated by 200 meters of empty open ground. Jiang Chun ducked behind the exit door and observed the area for several minutes, mapping out his safest route. A straight sprint across left him exposed to being swarmed. Monsters could emerge from any direction without warning. He resolved to follow the outer wall of the teaching building to the far corner, where thick shrubbery would hide his movements from sight. From there, he would cross a 30-meter stretch of exposed pavement to reach the side entrance. 30 meters, he could cover that distance in 5 seconds with a full sprint, as long as he did not trip. He could not carry any cumbersome weight, and he had to maintain a steady grip on his spear. Under no circumstances could he glance backward mid-sprint. He set his plan into motion. The stretch along the building wall passed without incident. None of the roaming zombies noticed his presence. When he reached the open pavement, Jiang Chun held his breath and hunched low to sprint forward. Halfway across the clearing, a zombie to his left twisted its head toward him. Jiang Chun ignored it and kept running. Pausing or veering off course would break his momentum and slow his escape. The sound of his sneakers hitting the concrete echoed loudly across the empty playground. Shuffling footsteps echoed behind him as the undead gave chase. He steadily widened the gap between himself and the monster. These creatures could never match a healthy human's running speed. The side entrance of the comprehensive building came into view. He slammed the door open and darted inside. Yanking it shut behind him, it was a spring-loaded door that snapped closed automatically. Thudding impacts resounded from the other side as the zombie threw itself against the wood, yet the spring mechanism held firm. Jiang Chun grabbed a mop handle and wedged it against the doorknob. The ground floor of the comprehensive building housed a cafeteria and a supermarket. The cafeteria's metal rolling shutter was pulled fully closed, while half the glass panels of the supermarket's front door lay shattered on the floor. Jiang Chun stepped carefully over broken glass to enter the shop. Several shelves had toppled over, leaving the floor buried in debris, yet most of the food stock remained intact. Instant noodles, crackers, canned goods, mineral water, and bottled drinks littered every surface. The refrigerated display cases had lost power long ago, their fresh contents rotting and emitting a foul stench. But all shelf-stable supplies remained usable. Jiang Chun located a woven shopping bag beside the checkout counter and began loading provisions, prioritizing items by survival value in his head. Water first, followed by high-calorie food, salt, and sugar. His body burned enormous energy to fuel its self-healing, and the other 3 needed ample calories to endure their nightly feverish chills. He had to gather enough supplies to sustain all 4 people for 3 full days. He stuffed more than a dozen bottles of mineral water into the bag, an entire carton of packaged instant noodles, 8 cans of luncheon meat, and a large sack of hardtack biscuits. He paused mid-stockpiling as the bag neared capacity, recalling Su Qingya's agonizing symptoms the night before. It was severe abdominal cramping paired with plummeting body temperature, far worse than ordinary cold exposure. He circled the aisle racks, heading for the beverage section to grab multiple individual packets of brown sugar, then swept several boxes of painkillers and vitamin tablets from the pharmacy shelf. He had no way of knowing whether brown sugar and pain relievers would ease the strange cold afflicting his 3 transformed friends, yet any form of relief was better than letting them suffer through the symptoms unaided. For the return trip, he slung 2 full woven bags over his shoulders, the heavy load straining his shoulder muscles. The supplies weighed far more than he had anticipated, making a return sprint across the playground impossible. Carrying this much cargo through open ground would turn him into an easy target for roaming zombies. He mapped out an alternate escape route for the journey back. A covered overpass on the comprehensive building's 2nd floor connected directly to the teaching building. From there, he could follow the 3rd floor hallways all the way back to the dormitory complex. The detour added distance to his path, but it was vastly safer than crossing the playground. Tall iron fencing lined both sides of the overpass, blocking zombies from climbing up to reach him. His only risk was being trapped between monsters front and back. He reached the entrance to the 2nd floor overpass, only to find the metal lock fastened shut. Jiang Chun set the supply bags down, sliding the tip of his iron spear into the gap of the U-shaped padlock and pushing downward hard. A sharp snap echoed as the lock split open. The heavy metal chain clattered onto the floor, the noise bouncing off every wall of the empty hallway. Multiple sets of shuffling footsteps emerged from a 2nd-floor office down the corridor. More than one zombie had been drawn to the racket. Jiang Chun did not look back. He grabbed both woven bags and sprinted onto the overpass, racing through to the 3rd floor of the teaching building. He slammed the connecting door shut and twisted wire tight around the doorknob to secure it shut. Zombies crashed against the glass window set into the door, leaving smudged black handprints across the pane. The wooden frame shook violently beneath their relentless pounding. Jiang Chun gasped for air as he followed the third-floor hallway back toward his dormitory. By the time he reached the door to room 301, he was drenched in sweat, his physical stamina completely depleted. He needed to eat immediately to replenish his drained energy reserves. He knocked the door twice in quick succession, then once longer, the prearranged signal. A narrow crack opened in the door. Su Qingya stood on the other side, her gaze locking onto the fabric bandage wrapped around his forearm, her expression tightening with quiet alarm. She did not speak a single word. Jiang Chen squeezed through the gap into the room and set the heavy supply bags on the floor, exhaling a deep, exhausted breath. Tai Nan and Xiao Luo hurried over to inspect the hall. Instant noodles, canned meat, and bottled water, more than enough to feed all four of them for an entire week. Jiang Chun laid out every item one by one, setting the brown sugar, painkillers, and vitamin tablets out in plain sight as well. They all needed to eat their fill. Sufficient energy would help them survive the brutal, nightly cold spells. He pushed the sugar packets and medicine boxes toward the center of the group. Qingya suffered terrible stomach pain yesterday, and both of you have been racked with constant chills. I don't fully understand what's happening to your bodies, but take these regularly. They should at least take the edge off your discomfort. The rustling sound of the others sorting through food fell silent. Tynan stared at the boxes of painkillers, her expression shifting through several unreadable emotions before she clicked her tongue, stuffed one box into her pocket, and turned to sit facing the wall. Xiao Luo, by contrast, paid no mind to the tension and tore open a pack of hardtack to start eating straight away. We should all eat something first. Jiang Chun picked up a piece of the compressed biscuit as well. He held his injured arm out forward, and Su Qingya stepped toward him without hesitation. Jiang Chun froze mid-movement. Su Qingya retrieved a bottle of iodophor and cotton swabs from one of the supply bags, her eyes fixed firmly on the gash on his forearm. This wound needs cleaning. An infection would be catastrophic. We can't afford for you to be incapacitated. Jiang Chun unwound the makeshift fabric bandage from his arm. The bleeding had stopped, though the edges of the cut remained raw and split open. Su Qingya dipped the cotton swab into the antiseptic and pressed it against the wound with firm pressure. Jiang Chun sucked in a sharp breath at the stinging burn. Bear with it, Su Qingya replied, never lifting her eyes from the injury. Once she finished disinfecting the laceration, she tore open a gauze pad and wrapped his forearm, her movements clumsy and unpracticed. Thank you, Jiang Chun said quietly. Be more careful next time. Su Qingya stowed the leftover gauze away. If you get yourself killed, none of us will make it out of this alive. Jiang Chun met her gaze. I know. He leaned back against the dorm room door, chewing dry hardtack as he sorted through their new supplies. The food stockpile would sustain them for a week, yet this was only a temporary solution. He glanced around the cramped room at the three women beside him. Three strikingly beautiful young women, all lacking any combat experience and reliant entirely on his protection. He had to find a way to help them regain the ability to defend themselves. If a horde of zombies or hostile surviving scavengers found their hiding spot, he could not hold off every threat alone. Sooner or later, all four of them would perish together. He needed to uncover the source of the frigid, debilitating energy plaguing their bodies. The immediate crisis of food scarcity had been resolved, yet new hardships piled up day after day. By the third day, the four of them remained crammed inside room 301. Half the ceiling had caved in completely. The air grew stiflingly hot during daylight hours, only to plummet to freezing temperatures once night fell. They had covered the gaping ceiling hole with torn curtain fabric and scrap bed sheets, blocking rainwater from leaking inside, yet the blood-red sunlight outside still seeped through the makeshift covering unimpeded. The layers of cloth offered almost no insulation against the extreme temperature swings. Jiang Chun sat beside the door, leaning back against its warped wooden frame, slowly chewing half a piece of compressed biscuit. The dry, dense food coated his throat, making it difficult to swallow. They had survived entirely on dehydrated rations for days on end, leaving his stomach heavy and unsettled. He twisted open a mineral water bottle and took a sip, ready to pass the bottle to Su Qingya beside him. It's sweltering in here. A complaint drifted from the corner of the room. Tynan grabbed the hem of her sweatshirt and pulled the garment over her head in one fluid motion, tossing the crumpled fabric onto the floor. Her movement mirrored the casual way she used to strip off her basketball jersey after practice back in their old dorm days. Beneath the sweatshirt, she wore a simple athletic tank top scavenged from the women's dorm rooms the day prior, thin fabric soaked through with perspiration from the oppressive heat. Sweat glistened across her tanned skin, rolling down the defined lines of her abdominal muscles. Her physique carried the sturdy, athletic build she had always possessed, now framed by a woman's figure. Tynan paid no mind to the exposed state of her upper body, oblivious to any awkwardness it might cause. She reached for a water bottle resting beside her, tilting her head back. She poured half its contents over her neck and shoulders in an attempt to cool down. Water streamed down her collarbone, soaking the edges of her tank top and clinging the thin fabric to her skin. Tainan. Jiangchen nearly dropped the half-eaten biscuit clutched in his hand. Tainan twisted to face him, her expression utterly confused and innocent, water still dripping from her jawline down her neck. Put your shirt back on. Jiangchen enunciated each word slowly, forcing his eyes fixed on the tattered cloth covering the broken ceiling to avoid glancing at her. The sight before him stirred conflicting feelings he struggled to process. Why bother putting it back on? It's over 30 degrees in here. Aren't you stifling too? Tainan shook her damp black hair carelessly, strands sticking to her shoulders and arms from the sweat and spilled water. Her sun-kissed skin stood out sharply against the dim crimson light filling the dorm. Do you have any idea how different your body looks now? Jiangchen snapped without thinking. Back when they were all male roommates, every summer they would strip shirtless to cool off after basketball practice. They lined up waiting to use the communal showers without a second thought. That was no longer the case. Tainan's body had transformed completely into that of a physically striking young woman. Tainan froze for a moment, glancing down at her own torso, then at the sweatshirt discarded on the floor. Oh, that single quiet word was her only response. She bent to pick up the sweatshirt and draped it loosely over her shoulders, a half-hearted gesture that barely covered any part of her body. Jiangchen inhaled deeply, then exhaled slowly, drawing another breath to steady his racing heart. As a healthy young man of 20, his physical instincts reacted naturally to what he saw. Once, Tainan could have stripped completely naked in front of him, and he would not have spared a second glance. She was simply his childhood roommate, his closest brother. Now, every curve of her new female form, every casual gesture she made, pulled his physical and mental perceptions in opposite directions. The warring thoughts in his head left him teetering on the edge of mental exhaustion. He needed a distraction to calm his racing mind immediately. Your face is bright red, Jiangchen. Xiao Luo suddenly spoke up, having crept over to kneel beside him without him noticing. Her clear eyes stared unblinkingly up at his cheeks. I'm not. It's just the heat. Jiangchen refused to acknowledge the truth. Then why's your neck flushed too? Xiao Luo pointed a finger at his bobbing Adam's apple. Cut it out. Xiao Luo grinned widely, revealing a row of small white teeth. The playful smirk was identical to the mischievous expression he remembered from his old male friend. Yet paired with her delicate, doll-like facial features, it came across as gentle and coaxing instead. Jiangchen stood abruptly and crossed to the window to stand in the faint cross breeze, desperate to clear his head and reaffirm that these three people were still his original brothers at their core. Su Qingya had not uttered a single word through the entire exchange. She sat tucked away in the corner, flipping through an old notebook salvaged from the wreckage of campus, scribbling notes across its pages. She had not lifted her gaze once the whole time, yet Jiangchen caught a small tell. Her fingers pressed hard against the notebook pages, crumpling the paper at every corner as she turned them. Days dragged on in this constant state of absurd internal conflict. By the fourth night, their surroundings grew far more dangerous. The radius the zombies roamed appeared to be expanding steadily. Constant crashing and tearing sounds echoed up from the floors below, and the steady shuffle of undead footsteps grew louder and more frequent in the hallways. Once, a group of zombies had even wandered all the way up to the third floor, pausing directly outside the door to room 301. The wire-wound door had finally held its ground. The creature slammed against it for over 10 minutes without breaking through. The wooden panel shrugged, letting out harsh, scraping noises. Eventually, it shuffled away. But everyone knew one thing for certain. The third floor was no longer safe. This door wouldn't hold out much longer. We need to relocate. Early on the fifth morning, Jiangchen called a meeting. The four of them sat in a circle. Supplies on the floor had already been sorted and split into 4 woven sacks. Su Qingya sat cross-legged, her back ramrod straight. Tainan squatted with her hands on her hips, this time keeping her legs closed. Xiao Luo huddled beside Jiangchen, clutching a bottle of water, leaning lightly against his arm every now and then. Head upstream, or head outside. Su Qingya cut straight to the heart of the matter. Going higher serves no purpose. The rooftop has no supplies and no escape routes. Jiangchen picked up a pen and sketched a crude map in his notebook. Dormitory building, teaching building, complex building, sports field. He drew a heavy circle over the complex building with the tip of his pen. If we get trapped there, we're dead. We have to leave this dormitory block. Our target's the complex building. It has a cafeteria and a convenience store, full of supplies. What's more, its ground floor has iron gates we can lock tight, far sturdier than this shabby dorm. It's 500 meters away. Su Qingyao stared at the map. We'll have to cross an open stretch in between. Exactly. We move in daylight. Zombies grow sluggish during the day. Jiang Chun tapped the notebook. Traveling after dark was suicide. The undead moved far faster once night fell. What about the rest of us? Tynan brought up the most realistic concern without delay. I have no doubt you could fight your way out alone. She fixed her gaze firmly on Jiang Chun. But the three of us. Jiang Chun watched her clench and unclench her fists, knuckles cracking faintly. We don't have enough combat strength. She ground the words out between her teeth. Tynan had once been a star athlete, capable of taking down 3 opponents single-handedly, the vice-captain of the Sonda Club. Now trapped in this female body, most of her strength had drained away. Admitting she lacked fighting power hurt worse than any wound, a crushing blow to her pride. You won't need to fight at all. Jiang Chun tossed his pen aside. I'll clear the path. All you 3 need to do is stay close and survive. That was the full plan. He'd eliminate every threat, leaving the others only to follow safely. What if there are too many of them? Su Qingyao asked. I'll head to the complex building alone this afternoon. Jiang Chun stood up. I'll wipe out every stray zombie along the route. Then we leave first thing tomorrow morning. Every risk had to be minimized. You're going by yourself? Tynan shot to her feet with a sharp movement, knocking over an empty water bottle beside her. That's out of the question. I'm going alone. Jiang Chun cut her off, his tone leaving no room for argument. Bringing anyone else would only slow him down. None of the 3 possessed the stamina to outrun zombies if trouble struck. Stay here and finish packing. Tomorrow each of you carries 1 sack of supplies. Take as much as you can manage. Tynan glowered at him, chest heaving with frustration. She bit back the retort burning on her tongue. Jiang Chun grabbed the iron bed leg he used as a weapon from beside the bed. The metal bar was already warped from constant use. He rewrapped strips of cloth around the grip for better traction, ready to head out. As he walked past Tynan, she suddenly grabbed the sleeve of his jacket. Her grip was stronger than it had been the past 2 days. If you don't make it back out there. Her voice came out rough, eyes avoiding his. I'll never forgive you, even in the afterlife. Jiang Chun paused, glancing down at the hand clutching his clothes. Slender fingers, skin no longer rough as it had once been, faint calluses from years of boxing still lingering over her knuckles. I'll be fine. He pulled his sleeve free. Wait for me. He pushed open the door and stepped out. The moment it clicked shut behind him, he caught faint mumbled words from Xiao Luo inside, muffled and indistinct through the wood. The hallway air reeked of cold rot, dried black blood crusting the floor beneath his feet. Jiang Chun tightened his hold on the iron bar, stepping forward with steady, quick strides. His task for the afternoon was clear all zombies along the route. Tomorrow, he'd lead the 3 others to the complex building. Take it 1 step at a time, cling to survival day by day. The afternoon sweep went far smoother than he'd anticipated. Sunlight dulled the zombies' senses, slowing their reactions and blunting their sight and hearing. He hugged the walls as he moved. He encountered the first undead at the 2nd-floor stairwell, hunched over a corpse it gnawed on. Jiang Chun crept up from behind, drove the bar straight through its throat, pulled it free, and sent the creature crashing to the ground. Hardly a sound escaped. Black gore splattered across the wall. He struck down 4 more wanderers scattered through the corridors, each blow growing more precise, a single strike enough to kill. When he reached the ground floor of the teaching building, he stacked broken desks and chairs to block off every doorway where more zombies might emerge. After securing all hazards along the edge of the open field, the sky had already darkened. The crimson moon hung low overhead. He had to return immediately. Night belonged to the undead. He sprinted back as fast as he could. Around the 3rd-floor bend, a hidden zombie lunged at him from the ceiling rafters. Jiang Chun twisted away from the fatal pounce and crushed its skull with 1 swing of the bar. 2 fresh, shallow gashes sliced across his forearm. Thanks to his pure yang physique's accelerated healing, minor wounds like these scabbed over within half an hour. He knocked twice short, once long when he reached room 301. The door swung open to reveal all 3 women waiting right at the threshold. They had never strayed an inch away. Tynan stepped forward first, checking his body for injuries without hesitation. She lifted his sleeve and twisted his arm to examine every inch, her movements as brusque as they'd always been, yet her hands felt soft and cool to the touch. I'm unhurt, really. Jiang Chun tried to pull his sleeve back down. Stay still and let me check. Tynan refused to release him, her eyes scanning every part of his frame. She only let go once she confirmed the only wounds were the crusted scratches on his arm. Su Qingya handed him an unstoppered bottle of water, saying nothing, her gaze lingering briefly on the scabs covering his forearm. Xiao Luo had already set his dinner out on the floor, a bowl of instant noodles topped with a ham sausage. Jiang Chun drained half the bottle in one gulp. He sat and devoured the noodles, slurping down every last bit of broth until warmth settled in his stomach. We leave at 6 tomorrow morning. He set the empty bowl aside. Everything ready. All three nodded. None of them slept much that night. Silence filled the dorm, only the sound of each other's soft breathing breaking the quiet. At 4 in the early hours, when the crimson moon burned brightest, Su Qingya suffered another attack of her extreme, cold flux. This episode was milder than the first. She didn't make a sound, merely bit down on the edge of her blanket. She curled into a tight ball in the corner, enduring the bitter cold seeping from her body until a thin layer of frost coated her eyebrows. Unable to bear it any longer, she stood and walked over. She came to where Jiang Chun lay on the mat by the door. Jiang Chun hadn't actually fallen asleep. He'd woken the second she began biting her blanket. He kept his eyes closed as he felt her icy fingertips wrap around his wrist, cold enough to sting. Moments later, he felt the natural warmth from within his body flow outward automatically, traveling down his wrist to her. He did not open his eyes or speak, not wanting to embarrass her. Su Qingya stayed silent too. They remained like that for half an hour, their hands joined. The chill faded from her skin and the frost on her brows melted away. Only then did she silently let go, stand, and return to her spot. Moving so softly her breathing barely made a sound. Jiang Chun opened his eyes in the dark, watching her back. Moonlight seeped through a crack in the curtains, casting a faint cool sheen over her long black hair. This woman carried such fierce pride. Even when fighting just to survive, she refused to rely on others openly. He looked away, rolled onto his side to face the wall. The faint lingering cool of her touch still left on his wrist. He had to get them all to the city center quickly and find the antidote. Tomorrow, they'd leave this place behind. Promptly at 6 a.m., Jiang Chun rose first. Dawn had barely broken, painting the sky a dull crimson red. He inspected his cloth-wrapped iron bed leg. The three women had already finished packing their makeshift backpacks, stitched together from pillowcases and bed sheets. Su Qingya carried the largest load, her back held straight as she insisted she still had decent stamina. Tynan bore all their weapons. Another iron bar and a rusted kitchen knife scavenged from a neighboring dorm room. Xiao Luo's pack was the lightest. The thin straps dug into her narrow collarbones. Jiang Chun hadn't made her carry more. Speed mattered far more than fair distribution in this world. Let's go over the route one more time. Jiang Chun lowered his voice, sweeping his gaze across the three of them. Exit the dorm, turn left, cross the connecting walkway to the girls' dormitory. Take the west staircase down to the ground floor, head out the side door. Follow the north wall of the teaching building to the corner. Then sprint the 30-meter open stretch straight for the complex building's side entrance. No talking the entire way. He paused, hefting the iron bar in his hand. I'll lead and clear all threats. Stay within 2 meters of each other. If any zombies appear, don't stop. Just run. I'll handle them. He'd replayed this route dozens of times in his head. The covered walkway offered cover. The girls' dorm had been cleared the day before. The only true danger was that 30-meter open clearing. Once they stepped inside the complex building and slid the iron gates shut, they'd be safe. The three nodded in understanding. If we get separated along the way, Jiang Chun began. We won't get separated. Tynan cut him off, lifting her chin firmly. Wherever you go, I'm right behind you. If I get swarmed and pinned down. Jiang Chun ignored her interruption, locking eyes with each woman in turn. Don't stop to help me. Run straight into the complex building and lock the gates behind you. Jiang Chun. Tynan's voice sharpened with alarm. That's an order, his tone hardened. Leading them out meant gambling all their lives. Tynan's lips twitched, but she said nothing. Su Qingya stared at him with an unreadable, blank expression. Xiao Luo clung tightly to the hem of his shirt, twisting the fabric between her fingers anxiously. Do you all understand? Jiang Chun pressed firmly. We understand. Su Qingya answered first, her quiet voice steady and calm. Tynan forced the single word through gritted teeth. Xiao Luo stayed silent, slowly releasing her grip on his shirt. Move out. Jiang Chun pushed open the warped wooden door. The hallway remained stained and blood-soaked, old black gore flaking off the walls. After days of exposure, none of them recoiled in terror as they had on their first day trapped here. He took the lead, iron bar gripped in his right hand. The kitchen knife was tucked into his waistband. The three women followed behind, footsteps soft and muted. The connecting walkway was clear. He'd kicked aside all shards of broken glass the previous afternoon. The girls' dorm stairwell held no threats. He'd cleared the area yesterday. The headless corpses abandoned in the corners lay motionless with no sign of movement. They descended to the ground floor and reached the side door. Jiang Chun leaned forward to peer outside. The morning light was dim and gray. The crimson tint faded slightly. The sports field stretched empty before them, two zombies wandering far in the distance, over 100 meters away. The path along the teaching building's north wall had been swept clean the previous day, as he'd confirmed. They couldn't afford to hesitate. Any delay would let the distant undead drift closer. Now, stay close. The four hugged the wall as they advanced, the faint crunch of their shoes on muddy ground setting Jiang Chen's nerves on edge. He kept a sharp eye on the far-off zombies. They showed no sign of reacting, their hearing dulled by daylight. They reached the teaching building corner without incident. The 30-meter open clearing stretched ahead, the complex building's side door clearly visible, hanging ajar. We sprint straight across on my count. 3, 2, wait. Su Qingya suddenly grabbed his arm. Jiang Chun froze at once, lifting the iron bar in alert. Beside the side entrance, Su Qingya's sharp eyes flicked toward the shadowed corner beside the door, tilting her chin slightly to signal it. Jiang Chun followed her line of sight. Crouched in the shadow beside the complex building's side wall lay a zombie. Between the poor light and its hidden angle, they would have walked right past it unnoticed if Su Qingya hadn't spotted it. The creature's shoulders twitched repeatedly as it hunched over something on the ground. "I'll take it out first," Jiang Chun whispered quietly. He darted across the 30 meters in under 5 seconds, wind whipping past his ears. The zombie remained oblivious, hunched over the carcass of a dead cat, black fur and dark blood strewn across the pavement beneath it. Jiang Chun raised the iron bar and brought it crashing down hard against the back of its skull. A dull crunch echoed as bones splintered, black blood splattering the base of the wall. One blow finished it. He pulled the bar free and shook off the gore coating the metal. Then he waved the three women forward. Su Qingya reached him first, her movements quick and efficient without a hint of hesitation. Tainan hurried after, half dragging the shorter-legged Xiao Luo to keep pace. All four burst through the complex building's side entrance. Jiang Chen stepped inside last, hauling the door shut and looping a fire hose around the latch twice to jam it fast. "We're here." He exhaled a breath of relief, leaning back against the door. The complex building's ground floor lobby was spacious, dimly lit. Heavy iron security gates blocked every exit leading outside. Jiang Chen didn't allow himself a long rest. They needed to secure every entry point immediately. He swept through the lobby in a quick check. The front gate's iron shutter was already fully lowered. Likely the last act of the security guard when the outbreak began, its lock latch shut tight. He'd already barricaded the side door moments earlier. The back gate, its iron shutter hung halfway open, a zombie's rotting arm snaking through the gap. Blackened nails scraped harshly against the concrete floor. "Stay back." Jiang Chun held out an arm to block Tainan as she stepped forward. He walked over to the thrashing limb, flesh half rotted away at the wrist, still swiping blindly through the air. He lifted the iron bar and struck the wrist 3 sharp times. Bone and sinew snapped. The severed arm fell to the floor and twitched for a long moment before stilling. He gripped the bottom edge of the heavy iron shutter and hauled it down hard. A deafening clang echoed as it slammed shut. He grabbed a U-shaped padlock hanging on the wall, slipping it through the latch and locking it tight. Thuds echoed from outside as zombies slammed against the metal, but the thick iron shutter barely vibrated, unshakable. "We're safe, for now." Jiang Chun turned back, leaning his iron bar against the wall. The three women stood in the center of the lobby, each wearing a different expression. Su Qingya scanned every corner, eyes flicking over ceiling air vents and stairwell access points as she assessed their new surroundings for threats. Tainan still gripped the kitchen knife tight in her hand. Her knuckles were white with tension. Seemingly frustrated, they'd crossed the open clearing without facing a single fight. Xiao Luo stood at the convenience store entrance, staring inside with bright eyes. "This place is huge," she pointed toward the shelves lined with goods. "There's food and water everywhere, and plenty of space for us to rest too." The cafeteria kitchen's on the left. Su Qingya nodded toward the far wall. "There might still be a working gas stove. First we double-check every entryway to make sure they're all secured." Jiang Chun refused to let his guard drop. In the apocalypse, people always died right after letting themselves feel safe. Then we split up to sort supplies. "I'll inventory the convenience store. Su Qingya, you check the kitchen. Tainan and Xiao Luo stand watch over the stairwell." The four split off to complete their tasks. This complex building was leagues better than the dormitory block they'd fled. The cafeteria kitchen held functional cooking appliances. Jiang Chun twisted the gas valve, and a flame flickered to life. There was still fuel left in the tank. Cabinets were stocked with bowls, plates, and utensils. The freezer had thawed, but its contents of frozen packaged food remained intact, no rot setting in. He'd already glanced through the convenience store earlier. Its shelves brimmed with untouched instant noodles and bottled water. The second floor held empty classrooms and a small meeting room. A thin stream of water trickled from the restroom faucets, leftover reserves in the building's water tank. No one knew how long the supply would last, but it was more than enough for their immediate needs. He'd made the right choice picking this location. A weight lifted from Jiang Chen's chest. With these supplies, they could survive for half a month, more than enough time to plan their next move toward the city center. By noon, Jiang Chen lit the gas stove and boiled 4 bowls of instant noodles, tossing in 2 frozen meatballs he'd dug out of the freezer as an extra treat. The 4 crouched on the cafeteria floor, holding their bowls and eating in quiet. Only the sound of slurping noodles filled the air. The atmosphere felt far lighter than it had the past few days. Warm food settled in their stomachs, spreading heat through their bodies and reigniting their will to keep going. This noodles tastes amazing, Chingu. Xiao Luo shoveled hers down without lifting her head. It's just instant noodles, Tainan grumbled dismissively, yet finished her bowl faster than anyone else. She held her empty bowl out toward him. Is there any broth left? Help yourself to whatever's in the pot, Jiang Chen replied. Su Qingya ate slowly and calmly, not uttering a single word. When Jiang Chun glanced over, he caught the faintest hint of a smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. The closest thing to joy he'd seen from her since the disaster struck. Jiang Chun looked out at the 3 of them, his throat tightening with quiet emotion. 5 days had passed since that catastrophic night. 3 childhood friends had woken trapped in women's bodies. The world transformed into a zombie wasteland. Food was scarce and fought over. Safety was bought only with constant risk and blood. But they were still alive. All 4 of them had survived. As long as they drew breath, there was still a chance to reach the meteorite in the city center and reverse their transformation back to their original selves. That debt was one he intended to repay, no matter what it cost him. Clear out the second-floor conference room to use as sleeping quarters this afternoon, he said, forcing his emotions under control. We'll all get a decent night's sleep tonight. I want a sofa. Luo raised her hand. Fine by me. I want one too. Iron Man called out right after her. Then you and Luo each get a sofa. Jiang Chun set his empty bowl on the ground. Su and I will sleep on the carpet. Su Qingya glanced up at him, her gaze lingering on his face. She said nothing to object for 2 seconds. This split was the most logical arrangement. Iron Man's sturdy frame would ache all over if she slept on the thin carpet, and Luo's small build couldn't stand the night chill. He and Su could tough it out for one night. He ran hot, so if Su's cold flare-up acted up after dark, he'd be close by to help her steady herself. The entire afternoon was spent fortifying their temporary base. Jiang Chun blocked every crack on the first floor, stacking cafeteria tables to create a secondary barrier at every entrance. The metal gate was piled high with furniture. Even if zombies smashed through the door, they'd never make it past. Su Qingya found paper and pens to draw a full floor plan of the complex, marking every entryway, resource cache, and even the exact locations of fire extinguishers. Iron Man handled all the heavy lifting. Though her strength had diminished since before, she was still the most capable of the 3 women. She hauled solid wooden cafeteria tables single-handedly without breaking a sweat, sweat soaking through her ill-fitting sports bra. Jiang Chun learned to keep his eyes down and focus on his own work, pretending not to notice. Luo cleaned the second-floor conference room, shoving all desks and chairs to the corners and wiping down the sofas. She also dragged thick curtains over from the neighboring classroom to use as extra blankets. They worked straight through until sunset. By dusk, their safe zone was fully set up. The first floor was sealed tight, and the second floor furnished for rest. Jiang Chun stood by the second-floor window and stared outside. The sunset blazed deep red. Every dusk after the end of the world looked like this. No one could tell if it was natural twilight or leftover haze from the cursed blood moon. The campus beyond was overrun by zombies. Shadowy figures wandered slowly through the fading light. Backpacks and sneakers littered the sports field. He hadn't felt the weight of it yesterday, but standing here looking down, Jiang Chun truly grasped that the world as they knew it was gone forever. The ordinary college life he'd once taken for granted would never return. But there was no time for melancholy. He needed to map out tomorrow's route. They had to pack all the supermarket supplies and stock up on water. They couldn't survive on what they'd scavenged here indefinitely. Jiang Chun. Su Qingya's voice echoed from behind him. He turned. Su Qingya stood in the conference room doorway, her long black hair loosely tied back with a rubber band she'd found in a desk drawer. She wore sweatpants and an oversized plain white t-shirt, backlit by the hallway lamp. Her expression was unreadable. "What's up?" Jiang Chen asked. "Come downstairs to the first floor." Su Qingya's tone was heavy. "Is something wrong?" Jiang Chen frowned. Su Qingya turned toward the stairs, tossing a line over her shoulder. "Come see for yourself." Her voice carried an unsettling edge. Jiang Chen grabbed the iron rod beside him and hurried after her. When he reached the main lobby, Su Qingya stood before the metal front gate, with Iron Man and Luo already beside her. All three stared out past the bars. Su Qingya nodded toward the plaza outside. Jiang Chen stepped up to the gate and peered through the gaps. Parked on the plaza in front of the building was a military truck. Its green hull was splattered with dried blood, the driver's door hanging open, the cabin empty. But stacked neatly in the truck bed were crates of supplies, Red Cross emergency aid boxes filling half the vehicle. Had a rescue team been here? The thought barely crossed his mind before he swept his gaze farther down the road, and dread shot straight through him. Three human figures were walking steadily toward the complex. Jiang Chen's heart sank sharply. The three people approaching moved with casual, arrogant swagger, none of the wariness any survivor ought to carry in the apocalypse. Most alarming was the bald man in the center, clutching a black firearm. Even nearly 200 meters away, its familiar outline sent a cold shiver down Jiang Chen's spine. A gun. In this lawless, broken world, a gun meant unchallenged power, the authority to take or spare lives at will. Behind him stood three unarmed women who had only just escaped the harsh transformations of the old world. A sharp buzz rang in Jiang Chen's head. All his plans, all the fragile security they'd built, shattered the second he laid eyes on that weapon. He spun around at once, voice sharp and urgent like never before. "Upstairs, back to the conference room now." "What's wrong?" Su Qingya caught the tension instantly, following Jiang Chen's line of sight outside, her pupils constricting. So what if there's three of them out there? Iron Man's mind still clung to their old way of thinking. She gripped the kitchen cleaver in her hand and stepped forward, ready to fight. "They're living people." Luo's voice trembled, edged with naive excitement. "There are other survivors out there. We can ask them what really happened to the world." "Quiet." Jiang Chen's sharp roar cut through their words. He grabbed Iron Man's arm and shoved her hard toward the stairwell, then pulled Luo close, his gaze locking firmly on Su Qingya. "Listen to me, this isn't fighting zombies. Those people have firearms. If we step outside right now, we're sitting targets, easy prey for anyone who wants to exploit vulnerable people. Do you understand?" He stressed the word prey with brutal weight. Iron Man froze. She glanced down at her own sturdy build, then at small, delicate Luo and cool, poised Su Qingya, all color draining from her face. She finally understood what Jiang Chen meant. Without laws or morality to hold people back in the end times, what fate awaited three defenseless women at the hands of armed strangers? It would be far worse than being torn apart by zombies. Lock the conference room door from the inside, and brace it with the heaviest table you can find. No matter what noises you hear, do not open the door, and stay completely silent. Jiang Chen spoke rapid fire, issuing final orders. "What about you?" Su Qingya cut to the critical question, her quiet tone laced with cold dread. "I'm going to confront them." Jiang Chen shifted the iron rod to his left hand, snatching the rusted cleaver from Iron Man's waistband to grip in his right. "No way. You can't take three men alone, not when they've got a gun." Iron Man panicked, grabbing his wrist with surprising strength. "Let go." Jiang Chen shook her off, his gaze icy cold. "This isn't the time to play hero. The three of you are liabilities right now. If I bring you along, I won't even stand a chance to run." The words cut like blades through all three women. Iron Man and Su Qingya paled completely. Neither had ever been called a liability in their lives. Remember, staying alive is what matters most. Jiang Chen held their gaze for a long beat, then turned without hesitation and headed for the stairs. "Jiang Chen," Luo called out, tears thickening in her voice. Jiang Chen's footsteps faltered for a split second, but he did not look back. "Trust me." With that, he vanished around the stairwell bend. The three women stood frozen at the stair landing, staring at one another. Iron Man's chest heaved, her eyes glistening. She bit her lip hard and sprinted up the stairs without a word. Su Qingya held Luo back before she could call out again, shaking her head gently. "Go upstairs. Don't make things harder for him." The three rushed back to the conference room, locking the door in an instant before heaving the massive wooden conference table forward to wedge firmly against the frame. Once it was secured, they collapsed to the floor, The only sound in the room their ragged, heavy breathing. Iron Man slammed a fist into the ground, her knuckles flaring red, but she felt no pain. Damn it! She ground out through gritted teeth, her voice raw. Humiliation crashed over her in overwhelming waves. She'd never imagined she'd become someone who needed constant protection, a burden to the person keeping them safe. Jiang Chun reached the ground floor and didn't linger in the lobby. He slipped quickly into the storage closet at the back of the cafeteria, a narrow space with a window looking straight out over the front plaza, hidden from plain sight. He crouched beneath the window and cautiously peeked half his head out. The three men had reached the center of the plaza, less than 50 meters from the gate. The bald man led the way, the black automatic rifle in his hands glinting cold under the dark red twilight. The lanky man on his left carried a 2-meter steel pipe sharpened to a point at one end. The short man on the right gripped a machete streaked with dried dark blood. All three wore half-full hiking backpacks, looking like a seasoned scavenging crew. Boss Bald, this building's pretty intact, metal gate all pulled down. There's definitely people inside, Bess. The short man piped up in a shrill voice. People are exactly what we want. No survivors means no supplies. This place looks secure. We can make it our new base. The bald man halted, gesturing at the locked metal gate with the barrel of his gun. Wouldn't hurt if there were women holed up in there too. The lanky man let out a coarse laugh. We've only been fighting zombies for days. It's driving me crazy. Enough chatter. The bald man commanded, clear leader of the group. He walked up to the gate and slammed the butt of his gun against the metal 3 times. Listen up inside. Open this gate. We're military search and rescue, here to bring survivors food and supplies. If you don't open up, we'll break our way in. His shout echoed through the empty lobby. Jiang Chen's heart hammered in the storage closet. Military? That was a blatant lie. No real military squad would act like this. He stayed silent, tightening his grip on the cleaver and iron rod. He waited, biding his time for an opening. Outside, seeing no response from within, the bald man sneered. Refuse kindness and you'll get force instead. He glanced back at the short man. Monkey, get to work. The man called Monkey pulled a tool kit from his backpack and rummaged through its contents. Jiang Chen's pulse spiked. They planned to pick the lock. It wouldn't work. This heavy commercial metal gate had a U-lock fastened high on the inside, impossible to tamper with from outside. Unless, he watched Monkey pull out a thin steel wire and a small crowbar. Jiang Chen's eyes widened. They intended to pry open the gap along the bottom of the gate and crawl underneath. The U-lock sat too high to block the lower opening entirely. Damn it, they know exactly what they're doing, Jiang Chen muttered under his breath. He couldn't wait any longer. If they broke inside, he stood no chance against all three alone. He had to take one out before they breached the gate. Drawing a deep breath, he hunched low and slipped silently out of the cafeteria, pressing flat against the wall as he crept toward a load-bearing pillar in the lobby, positioned just out of the gate's line of sight. From here, the men outside couldn't spot him. Monkey had already wedged the crowbar under the gate's base, heaving upward with all his strength. The lanky man stepped in to help him pull. A harsh, grating creak echoed as the metal gate lifted little by little. The bald man stood 5 meters back, rifle raised, and ready to guard their flank. Jiang Chun held his breath, his heart threatening to burst from his chest, fine beads of sweat dripping down his forehead. He only had one shot. The gate lifted roughly 30 centimeters, just enough space for a person to crawl through. That's enough. The bald man grew impatient. Monkey, you go in first to scout the area. Got it, boss. Monkey tossed down his tools, dropped to his hands and knees, and wriggled forward, his head slipping through the gap first. This was his chance. Jiang Chun pushed off with every muscle in his legs, lunging from behind the pillar like a predator pouncing on prey. 3 steps, covered in an instant. He raised the cleaver high in his right hand and brought it crashing down with every ounce of his strength onto the head that had just poked through the gate. Squelch. A dull, wet sound, like a melon splitting open, cut through the air. Warm blood splattered across Jiang Chen's face, thick and iron-tasting, reeking of human flesh. Jiang Chun did not pause for a second after landing the blow. He yanked the blade free and darted back behind the pillar, vanishing out of sight. The entire attack took less than 2 seconds, faster than a flash of lightning. Outside, the bald man and lanky man only heard a single wet thud before they watched Monkey's body jolt violently and go still. Monkey, the lanky man called out, receiving no reply. He bent down to drag Monkey's body back out, but the second his fingers touched the man's ankle, they came away slick and sticky. He pulled his hand back to stare at the bright red blood coating his palms. Boss, Monkey, he's dead. The lanky man's voice shook with terror. The bald man's face turned pitch black with rage. He raised his rifle, the black barrel aiming straight through the lifted gap beneath the gate. "Come out right now, whoever's hiding in there." He roared, and without hesitation, squeezed the trigger. Rat-a-tat-tat-tat. Deafening gunfire exploded through the lobby, bullets spraying wildly inside, striking the floor and walls to send sparks and stone fragments flying everywhere. Chunks of concrete showered Jiang Chen's face, stinging his skin. He pressed himself flat against the pillar, not daring to shift an inch. His heart raced, adrenaline flooding his veins. That single swing of the cleaver had drained nearly all his strength. His arm trembled faintly, not from fear, but from muscle spasms after expending every bit of his power. He'd killed a person. He'd split another human's skull open with a blade, by his own hand. There was no hesitation or paralyzing dread as he struck. In that split second, only one thought filled his mind. Kill them first, or he and the women with him would die. The magazine emptied in a burst of gunfire. Silence fell over the lobby again, broken only by the clink of spent bullet casings hitting the ground. "Come out." The bald man slammed a new magazine into his rifle, his voice dripping with malice. "If you don't show yourself, I'll toss grenades inside." Jiang Chen knew it was a bluff. If they'd carried grenades, they would have used them already. But he couldn't risk calling their bluff. He needed to lure the two remaining men inside, draw them into the lobby where he held the terrain advantage. Glancing at Monkey's lifeless body on the ground, a plan snapped into place in his mind. He deliberately made a small clattering noise, then spoke in a shaky, terrified tone loud enough for the men outside to hear. "Don't shoot. I'm coming out, I promise." His voice was soft, but clear through the metal bars. The bald man and lanky man exchanged a glance. "Damn it, there really is someone in there," the lanky man muttered. "Sounds like a scared college kid," the bald man sneered. "Tell him to lift the gate all the way open. Raise that metal gate, or we'll keep shooting." The lanky man shouted through the gap. Jiang Chen stayed hidden where he was. He kept his voice trembling, putting on a convincing act of panic. "I can't lift it alone. You'll have to crawl in through the bottom. I'm too scared to step outside." He framed himself as a terrified survivor, broken by fear. Outside, the bald man hesitated, Monkey's brutal death fresh in his mind, making him wary of a trap. "You think we're fools? One kid couldn't have taken Monkey down by himself." The lanky man scoffed, unconvinced. "It wasn't me." Jiang Chen's voice cracked with manufactured sobs, his performance flawless. "A zombie charged him from behind and bit him. I fought it off before it could get me." The explanation made perfect sense. Zombies were the most common threat they'd encountered on every stretch of their journey. The bald man bought the lie, at least partially. In his eyes, a lone trapped student could pose no real threat. Monkey must have simply gotten unlucky and ambushed by a walker. "Step out to the gate first. Let us see you." The bald man refused to drop his guard. "I can't. I'm too frightened," Jiang Chen whimpered. "Quit wasting our time, boss. I'll go in." The lanky man grew impatient. "I don't believe some kid can outmatch me." He handed the steel pipe to the bald man, dropped to his hands and knees, and prepared to crawl through the gap beneath the gate. The bald man did not stop him, keeping the rifle trained steadily on the opening, ready to fire at the slightest suspicious movement. Jiang Chen's heart climbed into his throat. This was exactly what he'd hoped for. One man inside, one man posted outside. He could take them down one at a time. The lanky man moved faster than Monkey had, scrambling through the gap in seconds. Once fully inside, he spotted the headless corpse on the floor and Jiang Chen's trembling form behind the pillar. "Damn, just a kid," the lanky man grumbled, brushing dirt off his clothes. He saw only a thin iron rod clutched in Jiang Chen's hands and the unbridled terror on his face, all his caution vanishing entirely. "Smart to surrender, brat," he snarled, stepping closer with a malicious grin. "Anyone else hiding in this building? Any women around?" Jiang Chen shook his head, shaking harder with every step the man took toward him. "No one else, just me. You wouldn't dare lie to me." The lanky man closed the distance, stepping directly beside the load-bearing pillar, completely blocking the bald man's line of sight from outside the gate. This was the moment. When the lanky man stood only 2 paces away, all traces of terror vanished from Jiang Chen's eyes, replaced by bone-chilling cold. He struck. Instead of retreating, he charged straight at the lanky man, crashing into his torso with his full weight. At the same time, he drove the iron rod in his left hand upward from below at a tricky angle, stabbing hard into the tall, thin man's abdomen. The tall, thin man never expected this supposedly terrified student to suddenly launch a vicious counterattack. By the time he registered what was happening, it was already too late. Puffed. The sharp, beveled tip of the iron rod pierced through the man's belly effortlessly, sinking deep into his torso. Ugh! The tall, thin man let out a pained groan, his eyes bulging wide as saucers as he stared at Jiang Chun in utter disbelief. Jiang Chun gave him no chance to recover. Having landed a clean hit, he violently wrenched the iron rod free, sending a spray of blood surging out. As the tall, thin man doubled over in crippling agony, the kitchen knife in Jiang Chen's right hand sliced lightning fast across the man's throat. A thin line of red appeared instantly. Then blood gushed forth like an erupting fountain. The tall, thin man clutched his neck, making gurgling, choking noises twice before collapsing rigidly to the ground, his body twitching nonstop. Jiang Chun gasped for air in ragged heaves, his chest rising and falling violently. He glanced at the two corpses on the floor, and his stomach lurched violently. But he forced the nausea down. There was still one enemy outside. Third brother? What's going on? The bald man outside heard the muffled groan and grew instantly alert. Jiang Chun did not reply. He picked up the 2-meter steel pipe the tall, thin man had dropped on the ground. This weapon was far more effective than his iron rod. Dragging the heavy pipe, he walked over to the metal gate. He knew the bald man was definitely aiming a gun straight at this spot. He could not step outside. He had to lure the bald man inside. Third brother, answer me. The bald man shouted again, a note of impatience creeping into his voice. Jiang Chun cleared his throat and mimicked the tall, thin man's rough tone, yelling gruffly, "It's fine, boss. This kid tried to run. I caught him. Come on in. Everything's safe now." His imitation was far from convincing, but the bald man was too anxious about his subordinate to pick up on the mismatch. All he registered were the words, "Everything's safe." Damn useless idiot. The bald man cursed, clearly speaking of the tall, thin man. He hesitated for several seconds before ultimately deciding to enter. After all, the supplies stored inside the building were too tempting to pass up. He slung his gun over his back, then dropped to his knees just like the other two men had, crawling through the narrow crack beneath the gate. Jiang Chun stood hidden behind the wall beside the doorway, gripping the heavy steel pipe tightly in both hands. He could hear the sound of fabric scraping against the concrete as the bald man crawled closer. Closer and closer. A shiny bald head poked through the gap first. Jiang Chun's pupils constricted sharply. Without a moment's hesitation, he raised the steel pipe with both hands and swung it down with every ounce of his strength straight at that exposed head. Boom! A deafening crash echoed out. The sound was far duller than the earlier blow that had split a skull, like a sledgehammer smashing a fully ripe watermelon. Red and gray matter splattered across the floor. The bald man's body stiffened for a split second, then went limp and crumpled to the ground, motionless at last. Silence finally descended over the space. Jiang Chun tossed aside the steel pipe and slid slowly down the wall to sit on the floor. He stared at the three lifeless bodies before him and the blood soaking every inch of the floor, his mind going completely blank. Just minutes ago, these men had still been breathing, living people. Now they had all died by his blade. He stared down at his blood-soaked hands, which shook uncontrollably. I've actually killed people. The roiling nausea in his stomach could no longer be held back. He twisted sharply aside, retching violently into the corner. He emptied every bite of instant noodles he'd eaten at noon, until only bitter sour bile remained. He had no idea how long he threw up. When there was nothing left to expel, he collapsed exhausted onto the ground, drawing huge gulps of air thick with the metallic stench of blood. Just then, rapid footsteps echoed from the stairwell. Jiang Chun. It was Tainan's voice. Jiang Chun snapped his head up to see Tainan, Su Qingya, and Xiao Luo rushing down the stairs toward him. Worry and terror were etched clear across all three of their faces. When they caught sight of the horrifying scene in the lobby, all three froze rigidly in place. Xiao Luo screamed first, clapping both hands over her eyes. Su Qingya's face turned deathly pale. Her body swayed unsteadily, nearly tipping over. Only Tainan kept her composure for a moment, glancing first at Jiang Chun, covered head to toe in blood and utterly disheveled, then at the three bodies and the black automatic rifle lying on the ground. She understood everything instantly. She sprinted forward and knelt down to wrap her arms tightly around the exhausted Jiang Chun. It's over, Jiang Chun. It's all over now. Her voice trembled, yet she held on to him with all her strength. Her warm body pressed against his, carrying a faint, gentle floral scent. Jiang Chun's frame stiffened for a split second, then the frayed nerves he'd kept taut beyond breaking point finally unraveled completely. He buried his face against Tainan's shoulder, sounding hoarse and broken, like a lost child. I killed them. All three of them. I killed every last one. Tainan's frame was soft and carried a light natural fragrance. Nothing like the bulky, sweat-soaked, hard-muscled brother he'd known before the strange transformation. Jiang Chun rested his head on her shoulder, momentarily stunned by the unfamiliar softness and gentle scent surrounding him. But the overwhelming trauma of taking human lives and crippling mental exhaustion quickly drowned out every trivial distraction. He only clung to her instinctively, craving a steady anchor where he could let down every guard he'd kept raised to survive. You did what you had to do. Tai Nan's voice rumbled above his head, shaky, yet laced with suppressed rage. They were ruthless scavengers who would have killed us without mercy. They deserved every bit of what came to them. She patted his back clumsily, the motion akin to calming a wounded animal. Jiang Chun could feel her own body trembling beneath his hands. She was terrified too. Even so, she had rushed to comfort him the second she saw him break down. Su Qingya and Xiao Luo walked over to join them. Su Qingya's complexion was still ashen, but her gaze had already regained its usual cool rationality. She glanced over the bodies scattered on the floor, then the automatic rifle, her brows drawing tight in a frown. Xiao Luo hid half behind Su Qingya, only daring to peek at Jiang Chun through the gap between her arm and Su Qingya's torso, glistening red eyes brimming with unshed tears. "Brother Chun, are you hurt anywhere?" she asked timidly. Jiang Chun lifted his head from Tai Nan's shoulder and shook his head. "I'm fine." His voice remained rough, yet his emotional state had stabilized significantly. He gently pulled away from Tai Nan and struggled to his feet, his legs still weak and unsteady. "We need to clean this area up first." Su Qingya spoke up, her tone steady and collected, as if she hadn't nearly fainted from shock moments earlier. "The heavy smell of blood will draw hordes of zombies to us." Jiang Chun nodded. Old Su really was incomparable. She could maintain clear logic no matter how chaotic the crisis. Tai Nan, Xiao Luo, head to the cafeteria to fetch water, mops, and cleaning cloths. Su Qingya began issuing clear instructions. Jiang Chun, go wash all the blood off yourself in the restroom and change into clean clothes. Her organized directions instantly brought order to the chaotic lobby. Tai Nan and Xiao Luo set off to complete the task without delay. Jiang Chun shot a glance at Su Qingya. His former dorm roommate had proven capable of extraordinary calm when lives hung in the balance. He said nothing more, dragging his weary body toward the restroom on the ground floor. He twisted the faucet open, letting icy cold water rush over his face and forearms. The mirror reflected a pale, unfamiliar face staring back at him. His eyes were bloodshot, and dried blood crusted across his cheeks and neck. He scrubbed his hands over and over again, desperate to wash away the sticky residue and the nightmarish memories of violence clinging to his skin. But no amount of scrubbing could erase it. The jarring jolt of steel splitting bone, the sharp resistance of a blade slicing through flesh, those sensations had burned themselves permanently into his mind. He knew he could never go back to who he'd once been. The ordinary college student who spent his free time gaming and playing basketball on the court had died completely earlier that day. In his place stood someone willing to kill other humans without hesitation if it meant surviving. He changed into a clean cotton t-shirt he'd found looted from a supermarket and stepped back out of the restroom. The lobby was mostly clean by then. All bloodstains had been scrubbed away, and the 3 corpses dragged to the back exit to be discarded once they found a safe opening. Tynan strained to heave the pried, open metal gate shut again. Her transformed body lacked the massive strength she'd once possessed, making the heavy metal barrier far harder to maneuver. Jiang Chun walked over, grabbed the bottom edge of the gate, and pushed with both arms. A loud clang echoed as the metal barrier slammed firmly closed. He secured the bolt tight with a fire hose, then stacked several heavy desks against the gate as an extra barricade. Once the task was finished, he walked over to the automatic rifle and bent to pick it up. The firearm was heavy, carrying the cold, solid weight of metal. He inspected it quickly. It was the domestically standard Type 95 automatic rifle, its magazine empty, with 2 fully loaded spare magazines set beside it on the floor. This was their first real firearm since the apocalypse descended, a critical advantage that drastically boosted their sense of safety. The 3 girls gathered around, staring curiously at the gun. "How do we operate this thing?" Tynan couldn't help reaching out to brush a finger against the gun's frame. "I practiced shooting a few times at a range club next to the Sonda gym before all this," Jiang Chun said as he pulled back the bolt to check the empty chamber. "I know the basics, though I'm far from an expert marksman." He slung the rifle over his shoulder again. "We should search the bodies for supplies too," Su Qingya reminded him. Jiang Chun nodded and knelt beside the corpses to search their belongings. The 3 men's backpacks held a decent stock of goods. Besides small rations of food and bottled water, there were lighters, coils of rope, a first aid kit, and a hand-drawn map. Jiang Chun unfolded the map. The sketch was crude, but clearly depicted a section of the city they were trapped in. The university town where they resided was circled and labeled Supply Point Number 3. At the very center of the map, a larger red circle enclosed a 5-pointed star, with 2 simple characters written beside it. Base. A base. Tynan leaned in to look closer. What kind of base is this? A survivor settlement, Su Qingya stated with certainty. An official shelter established by the military or government authorities. Jiang Chen's heart skipped a beat. This was exactly the vital information they'd been desperate to find. If they could reach this base, they might find answers to the strange physical transformations Su Qingya and the others had undergone, or at minimum gain official protection and safety. He studied the map carefully. The base sat downtown, roughly 30 kilometers straight-line distance from their current location. 30 kilometers, before the end of the world, the drive would have taken only 30 minutes by car. But now, those 30 kilometers teemed with roaming zombies and countless unknown threats, a true road of death. Are we going to head there? Xiao Luo whispered softly. We have to. Jiang Chen folded the map carefully and tucked it into his pocket. But not right now. We know nothing about the dangers waiting outside. Rushing out blindly will only get us killed. What do we do in the meantime? Tynan asked. Rest, train, and stockpile supplies. Jiang Chen looked each of the 3 girls in turn. Starting today, you can no longer think of yourselves as people who need constant rescue. You must learn to fight and defend yourselves. His gaze swept over Tynan, then Su Qingya, before settling on Xiao Luo. This broken world would show no mercy simply because their bodies had changed into women's forms. If anything, it would grow 100 times crueler to vulnerable people. The 3 fell silent, absorbing his heavy words. Su Qingya prepared dinner that night. She cooked a pot of plain congee using rice found in the campus kitchen, paired with a jar of pickled vegetables. After the brutal fight earlier, none of them had an appetite for rich, greasy food. The 4 sat around a cafeteria table, sipping their congee without speaking a word. A heavy, somber atmosphere hung over the group. Jiang Chen remained mentally drained after taking 3 lives. Meanwhile, the 3 girls were stung by his earlier remark about not treating themselves as burdens. Jiang Chen. Tynan suddenly set her bowl down and broke the silence. Teach me how to use the gun. Her expression was completely earnest, no trace of joking in her tone. Jiang Chen met her eyes and nodded. All right, count me in 2. Su Qingya set her bowl aside as well. And hand-to-hand combat. Our new bodies can't rely on the fighting techniques we mastered before the transformation. We need to relearn everything from scratch. I want to learn too. Xiao Luo raised her hand, determination shining bright on her young face. Jiang Chen looked at the 3 of them, a warm swell of emotion rising in his chest. His former roommates had not been broken by terror or despair. Understood. He finished the last of his congee. After we eat, head to the 2nd floor meeting room. I'll start by teaching you foundational physical conditioning and proper weight shifting techniques. Once they finished their meal, the 4 climbed to the 2nd floor. Jiang Chen first had them run through basic conditioning drills, squats, push-ups, high-knee jogs. Their attempts were shockingly poor. Tynan stumbled unsteadily through squats, thrown off balance by her altered center of gravity. She was winded after fewer than 10 repetitions, struggling to maintain stable posture. Su Qingya fared even worse. Her long limbs and limited flexibility left her unable to complete a single push-up. Her arms shook violently the moment she lowered her torso toward the floor. Xiao Luo was nimble and light-footed, but lacked all strength, gasping for breath after only a short jog. Your current physical fitness levels are below the average young woman's. Jiang Chen pointed out the harsh truth without softening his words. Our muscle mass has dropped drastically, and cardiovascular endurance weakened following the physical shift. Su Qingya panted, bracing her hands on her knees as she analyzed the root cause. So what do we do? Train endlessly for months on end with no shortcuts. Tynan dropped heavily onto the floor, running a frustrated hand through her hair. There are no quick fixes, Jiang Chen replied. We can only rebuild our strength bit by bit, starting with fundamental stamina and muscle training. He walked over to stand in front of Tynan as he spoke. Stand up. I'll walk you through a new weight shifting method. Your core balance sits lower now. You need to channel power from your hips and waist instead of relying solely on shoulder and arm strength like you used to. He held out his hands to steady her waist and guide her into the correct stance. The moment his palms made contact with her torso, both of them stiffened in surprise. Through the thin fabric of her shirt, Jiang Chen could clearly feel the warmth of her skin and the firm structure of her waist. Tynan's entire body tensed up, a jolt of awkwardness shooting through her at the unexpected close contact. Her cheeks flushed bright red instantly. What are you doing? She jumped back a step, flustered. I'm correcting your fighting stance. Jiang Chen pulled his hands away awkwardly as well. The Sonda power techniques you relied on before won't work with your current physique. Oh, right. Tainan stared at the ground, her voice barely audible. Jiang Chen stared at her flustered demeanor, his head throbbing with exasperation. Was this really the same Tainan who'd once slung an arm over his shoulders and shower alongside him without a second thought? Come back here, he said, forcing calm into his tone. Tainan shuffled slowly back to stand before him. Jiang Chen took a deep breath, focusing solely on the training instructions as he placed his hands lightly on her waist and shoulders once more to adjust her posture. But the close physical proximity made it impossible to fully block out distractions. Her warm frame, the light clean scent of her hair, the faint brush of her arm against his own as he repositioned her stance. Jiang Chen could feel his heartbeat speeding up again. He was a regular young man, after all, living day in and day out alongside three beautiful former friends permanently transformed into women, forced to guide them through hands-on combat training. This constant close contact was a severe test of his self-control. Brother Chun, Xiao Luo's soft, drawn-out voice pulled his attention aside suddenly. He turned to see Xiao Luo sitting cross-legged on the floor, tilting her delicate face upward to stare at him, her eyes watery and wide. My legs ache so badly from running earlier. Can you help me fix my stance too? She tilted her head to one side as she spoke, her tone overly sweet and overly demure. Jiang Chen's scalp prickled with discomfort. Xiao Luo had never acted this clingy or soft-spoken before the transformation. He'd always known her as a playful, mischievous shut-in, not this bashful, overly delicate girl. Quit fooling around, Jiang Chen snapped sharply. Okay. Xiao Luo pouted in apparent dejection, yet a faint glint of satisfaction flickered deep in her eyes. Jiang Chen turned back to Tai and to find her glaring sharply at Xiao Luo, her expression clearly irritated by the younger girl's overly coquettish manner. In the far corner, Su Qingya, who had not uttered a single word through the exchange, silently picked up a pen and scribbled furiously in a notebook, pressing the tip down so hard it nearly tore through the paper pages. Jiang Chen massaged his temples, overwhelmed by the awkward tension filling the room. How on earth was he supposed to navigate daily life like this for the foreseeable future? The training session drew to a close amid an extremely uneasy atmosphere. Jiang Chen was utterly drained, body and mind both worn thin. Teaching them hand-to-hand combat exhausted him far more than fighting off three enemies on his own. Physical contact was unavoidable, brushing against Tainan's waist, steadying Su Qingya's legs, steadying Xiao Luo's shoulders. Every single touch tested his self-restraint to the breaking point. Two conflicting voices warred relentlessly inside his head. One side screamed, "They're your brothers. They used to be men. Dwelling on inappropriate thoughts makes you nothing short of depraved." The other retorted sharply, "Nonsense. They're women now, gentle, lovely girls. Having such thoughts is only natural for any man." Jiang Chen felt on the verge of splitting apart mentally. That night, sleeping arrangements only compounded his troubles. The meeting room held just two sofas, per the plan they'd agreed on that afternoon. Tainan and Xiao Luo each claimed one. Jiang Chen and Su Qingya would bed down on the floor atop discarded curtains. To ward off the sudden cold chills that had overcome Su Qingya the night prior, Jiang Chen settled right beside her, less than half a meter separating their bodies. Deep night fell. Silence hung thick, broken only by the occasional distant snarl of zombies drifting through the windows. Jiang Chen tossed and turned, unable to fall asleep no matter how hard he tried. He could clearly hear Su Qingya's slow, steady breathing and catch the faint scent of shampoo lingering in her hair. Darkness amplified every sense. He could even feel a faint, icy chill rolling off her frame. It hadn't flared into a full cold spell yet, but that frigid aura weighed on his mind. He rolled onto his side to gaze at her sleeping face. Moonlight seeped through cracks in the curtains, tracing the flawless curve of her profile, her long eyelashes casting soft shadows beneath her lids. Her usual icy aloofness melted in slumber, leaving behind a quiet vulnerability. Asleep, she shed the guarded detachment she wore by day, looking like an ordinary young girl in need of protection. Jiang Chen let out a quiet sigh. Protect them, all three of them. That was his sole, unshakable resolve. He squeezed his eyes shut, forcing himself to relax and drift off. Just as he teetered on the edge of sleep, a soft rustling stirred beside him. Jiang Chen snapped fully alert in an instant, eyes flying open. He watched Su Qingya sit upright, her movements calm and unhurried. There was no sign of the cold seizure overtaking her. by the faint glow of moonlight. She pulled a notebook and pen out from under her pillow, the same one she'd been writing in all day. She flipped it open and set pen to paper, scribbling away steadily. Jiang Chun stayed motionless, eyes squeezed shut to feign deep slumber, yet pricked up his ears, burning with curiosity. In the middle of this apocalyptic nightmare, what would this ruthlessly logical girl commit to the page? Analysis of their current predicament? A plan for their next route of escape? All he heard was the constant scratch of ink across paper, going on for over half an hour. Eventually, Su Qingya set down her pen. She closed the notebook, tucked it back beneath her pillow, and lay back down to rest. The entire sequence unfolded without a single extra sound. Jiang Chun waited a long while, only opening his eyes once he was certain she'd fallen back asleep. His gaze fixed on the pillow where the notebook lay, curiosity gnawing at him relentlessly. What exactly had she written inside those pages? Curiosity overpowered his better judgment. He held his breath, moving like a thief as he slowly stretched a hand towards Su Qingya's pillow. His movements were feather-light, yet his heart hammered so loudly he feared it would give him away. At last, his fingertips brushed the notebook's stiff cover. He carefully slid it free, scurried back to his own mat, shielded the notebook with his body, and flicked on a tiny flashlight looted off 3 deceased survivors earlier that day. A dim beam cut through the blackness. He flipped open the notebook. On the title page, neat, forceful handwriting stood out in 4 clear characters. Journal of the End Times. Jiang Chun turned to the latest page, the words she'd just finished writing minutes ago. As the beam fell across the paper, his breath caught entirely in his throat. There were no tactical plans, no strategic analyses. It was a farewell letter, a last will. Father, Mother, if you are reading this, I am no longer alive. Please do not grieve for me. The world has descended into ruin, and death may well be a mercy now. My only regret is that I will never get to care for you in your old age and see you laid to rest. Your son, Su Qingya, holds no regret for being born into this family, yet I fear I have let you down. I never became the pride you hoped for, nor lived to see this crisis end. If there is an afterlife, I wish to be your son once more. Do not grieve over me. Your unfilial child, Su Qingya. Final words. Beneath the letter ran a smaller line of script. Jiang Chun, if I perish, burn this journal entirely. Let no one ever learn I have become a woman. Jiang Chen's hands trembled uncontrollably as he clutched the notebook. He had never imagined Su Qingya was carrying such crushing psychological weight. By daylight, she remained cool, rational, seemingly reconciled to her transformed body. Beneath that mask, she resisted this reality more fiercely than anyone, suffering deeper agony than all of them combined. She had even begun drafting her final words, preparing for her own demise. Your unfilial child, Su Qingya. Those 5 characters seared into Jiang Chen's heart like a red-hot iron brand. She still referred to herself with masculine pronouns, clinging fiercely to her identity as their son. Her pride and self-respect refused to let her accept her new form. That same stubborn pride had become the final weight threatening to crush her spirit. Jiang Chun snapped the notebook shut and switched off the flashlight. In the pitch dark, all he could hear was his own thunderous heartbeat. A tangled storm of rage and sorrow roiled violently in his chest. Rage at this cruel, broken world, and aching pity for his old friend, too proud to voice his suffering. He quietly slipped the notebook back under Su Qingya's pillow, then lay flat on his mat, staring wide-eyed at the ceiling. Sleep was entirely out of reach. He knew he needed to take action, to change something. They could not keep going on like this. Early the next morning, Jiang Chun was the first to wake. He glanced over at Su Qingya, still sound asleep, his expression heavy with complicated emotion. He hadn't closed his eyes all night, his mind racing with countless thoughts. He resolved to adjust his approach entirely. He could no longer push them through grueling, harsh training, least of all Su Qingya. He needed gentler, subtler methods to help them adapt. He stood up soundlessly and crossed to the window. Dawn had barely broken, a murky crimson glow shrouding the entire landscape outside. He picked up the Type 95 assault rifle resting in the corner of the meeting room and began taking it apart and reassembling it. He was familiarizing himself with every function of the firearm. Though he moved with great care, the soft clinks of metal roused the others. Tai Nan and Xiao Luo sat up on the sofas, rubbing the sleep from their eyes. Su Qingya stirred awake as well. She watched Jiang Chun disassemble the gun without a word, silently rising to tidy her belongings. You're up awfully early, Brother Chun, Xiao Luo yawned widely. Couldn't sleep. Jiang Chun replied without lifting his head. Are we training again today? Tai Nan asked. Her tone was a mix of quiet anticipation and unease. We are. Jiang Chen finished reassembling the rifle and stood upright. But we'll try a different training method today. He walked to the center of the room and faced the three girls. We're going to play a game. A game. All three stared at him in surprise. That's right, a game. A faint, mysterious smile tugged at Jiang Chen's lips. One that will help you grow accustomed to your new bodies and sharpen your combat instincts fast. He paused, speaking slowly and clearly. The game's name is Catch Me, and I'll teach you all my combat tricks.